It is now 5:30. I will call the meeting of the September 14th Plan Commission to order. We do have quorum. The first person that we will hear from is our tech facilitator.
All right, welcome to our virtual meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. The chair, clerk, and technical facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting committee members. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call, panelists will be unmuted briefly. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which they have their hands raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the board, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Our first agenda item is public comment. We do have one person registered for public comment. Catherine Pensack, 207 North Dickinson Street, Madison, Wisconsin. She notes neither support nor opposes and wishes to speak.
Catherine, you should have a prompt to unmute yourself.
I unmuted.
Okay, you're on.
Oh, great. All right. I want to thank the Commission so much for giving me a chance, I know, to speak tonight, because I know you have busy schedules and your meetings go long. My request is very simple. I've noticed in the plan requests and the project proposals that the businesses and people put before you, they don't specifically list what environmental actions they are taking. Now, the Westgate project did have a page of sustainability efforts and what they had done for sustainability. And they also had a page to show what they were doing for traffic control. And it was very simple, one-page thing. It was great. And I think that it's a way for the folks putting projects before you to brag about what they're doing, let us know what they're doing, and also a way for us to evaluate exactly what's happening. That's all I have to say. So I just want to thank you for making this comment and suggestion, and I hope you will put it forth as a request that is put in the proposal documents as something that needs to be put forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pensack. Moving on, the next item is communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Do we have any disclosures or recusals? Seeing no raised hands, I do have one communication. I have been working along with Ms. Stouter on the Plan Commission Policies and Procedures Manual. You will be getting a copy of that probably in the next couple of weeks. It will have track changes so you can easily see what the recommended changes are. It focuses largely on the items that we agreed upon implementing as an effort to make our meetings a little less lengthy. In addition, there were a few items that needed correction or clarification. For example, the voting and what the number of votes that are needed in order for a motion to pass. I would also encourage you to read carefully the whole Policies and Procedures Manual, not just the changes, because you may see some things that should be edited, changed, added to, and this would be your chance to do that. So I would encourage you to read the whole Policies and Procedures Manual. Okay, moving on. The next item on the agenda is we do have minutes for the August 5th special meeting to approve, and the minutes of the August 24th regular meeting to approve. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes, either set of minutes? I see no raised hands. I will assume unanimous. There. No, okay. I will assume unanimous consent to, we do need to get a motion though. Ms. Solheim, are you moving approval? Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Cantrell seconded. Thank you. So I will assume unanimous consent for approving the minutes unless I see a raised hand to object. I see no raised hand to object. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the schedule of upcoming meetings. We do have a regular meeting on October 5th, October 19th, November 9th, and November 23rd. In addition, we do have a special meeting on October 29th. That is focusing again on big picture items, and this one is focusing on transportation. Okay, the next group of items is under routine business. The items under routine business are agenda item 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Agenda item 2 is a referral item. Could we take that, please, first? Can I have a motion to refer that, please? Commissioner Cantrell, is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Sundquist. Are there any questions or discussion? Okay, I will assume unanimous consent on the referral unless I see a raised hand to object. Okay, moving on to routine business then, agenda item 3, Legistar 61878, discontinuing and vacating a portion of the public road right-of-way of Parkside Drive being located in part of the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter and also part of the southwest quarter of the southeast quarter of section 28, township 8 north, range 10, city of Madison, Dane County, Wisconsin, 17th Alder district. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Alder Lemmer. Do I have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Cantrell. I will assume unanimous consent on that unless I see a raised hand to object. Okay, motion passes unanimously. The next agenda item is agenda item 4, Legistar 61879, authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to execute a consent to occupy public sanitary sewer easement for the benefit of Malazi LLC, a Wisconsin limited liability company, or their successors, and assigns to allow certain private improvements within an existing easement granted to the public for sanitary sewer purposes on the property located at 1502 West Broadway, 14th Alder District. Can I have a motion on that, please? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell and seconded by Alder Lemmer. Any discussion, questions, comments? Seeing none, I will assume unanimous consent to approve unless I see a raised hand to object? Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item 5, Legistar 61903, authorizing the city to participate in the preparation of an amendment to the Town of Blooming Grove and City of Madison cooperative plan to allow for an alternate means of development of the cooperative development property. Can I have a motion on that? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Can I have a second, please? Seconded by Alder Lemmer. Are there any questions? Commissioner Sundquist.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad we referred item 2, and this one is kind of in the same category for me in that I wasn't sure what I was really seeing in the attached document in Legistar. Is the highlighted part of the document the new part that's being proposed? Is that what we're approving here, or is that what you're going to reopen and discuss with the town? Or it'd be helpful to have a little bit more on what this is.
Yes, I'll ask Ms. Stouter to talk about that a little bit.
Yes, thank you. So this essentially is an amendment that the town and city together would work to make in order to allow for the Voigt Farm property to come into the city sooner than our cooperative plan currently states that it would. So currently, it's slated to come into the city in 2027. And there's a really complicated process that it could come in a little bit sooner once developed. What we'd like to do jointly, town, city, and property owner would like to actually get this property into the city as soon as possible. And so the highlighted portion of the plan that's included on Legistar is just the excerpt of the plan that the town and city together would reopen and refine in the coming weeks to bring back before the Plan Commission and Council. But the goal is simply to allow for the Voigt property to come into the city from the town of Blooming Grove in the near future.
Okay, thanks. So at that point, if this is renegotiated, we could have a discussion about the reason for bringing the Voigt property in and any details on how that would occur once you've already had the discussion with the town.
Correct. This simply provides the go-ahead for the city and town to begin working on that amendment. So it will be back before you again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Sundquist. Did you have any other questions?
No, that was it.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or questions about this? Okay, we do have a motion and a second. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Not seeing any raised hands, motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is agenda item 6, Legistar 61905, authorizing the acceptance of ownership from Crawford, Marlborough, Nacoma Neighborhood Association of an informational kiosk located in Nakoma Park at 3800 Nakoma Road, 10th Alder District. Can I have a motion on that, please? Commissioner Cantrell moves approval. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Lemmer. Any questions or discussion of this agenda item? Seeing none, I will assume unanimous approval unless I see a raised hand to object. Motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is agenda item 7, 61920, determining a public purpose and necessity and adopting relocation orders for the acquisition of land interests required for the construction of improvements for the reconstruction of South Blair Street and the South Blair Street intersection with John Nolan Drive, located in part of the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter, government lot 4 of section 13, T7NR9E in the City of Madison 2nd, 4th, and 6th Alder districts. Can I have a motion? Commissioner Cantrell moved approval. Can I have a second? Seconded by Alder Lemmer. Are there any comments or questions in regard to this item? Commissioner Sundquist.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know. The routine business seemed meatier this time than usual, and I just want to know what is going to be built on these pieces of right-of-way that we're approving here.
It looks like we might have Mr. Pedikowski, who would be answering that. Mr. Pedikowski.
Thanks. Primarily these easements are temporary rental of the land so that we can grade behind the sidewalk and with the project so that we can have all sidewalk grades that meet the ADA requirements. So basically it's a temporary easement to grade behind the property, to adjust the level of the sidewalk, and then the easements expire after the project.
Fixing cross slope or something like that?
Cross slope or the maximum grade on at the ramps as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Sundquist. Did you have any other questions? Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or comments or discussion? Seeing no raised hands, I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to new business, agenda item 8, Legistar 61479, amending the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan to remove the recommended northerly extension of Omeda Drive. And I do believe we have a staff presentation by Mr. Grady.
Yeah, so I can offer some background, and then certainly turn over to Alder Tierney here, who's sponsoring this proposal. And so there's some brief background. I think hopefully you all received an email as we put on Legistar, just kind of background from the TPPB meeting August 31st. Basically, the GE property on the east side of the interstate off of Femrite Drive, they're looking to sell some excess land that they have, the southern part of their site, to a developer, HSA. HSA proposing to subdivide the property, develop that southern part. This is in our Yahara Hills neighborhood development plan. That plan does show Omeda Drive that exists coming off of Femrite Drive. It shows that road being extended to the north. The developer is kind of questioning the value of that road extension, and then certainly asking if the road the cost could be deferred to a later date. The city does not have a way to defer that cost of that construction. We just typically require construction of improvements along with development as called for in our subdivision requirements. And so the best way that we thought to kind of bring this question kind of to the boards, commissions, committees is to propose this plan amendment that would basically remove the recommended northerly extension of that Femrite Drive. At the August 31 TPPB meeting, we had several speakers, primarily folks that own or affiliated with properties adjacent to this planned right-of-way road extension. They asked that the extension continue in the plan as the plan called for, as they have some development proposals. There's a property that's owned by McAllen that's right off Femrite Drive. They have some concepts that they've been working with internally. A gentleman and his wife, the Blattermans, own some land to the north. they conveyed that not extending this road could landlock a part of their property, and then so they advocated for keeping the road as shown in the Yahara Hills NDP. And then we discussed it, and overall the TPPB recommended that be placed on file after some discussion. But I guess with that, maybe I'll turn over to Alder Tierney or however you'd like to proceed, Chair.
Thank you.
Alder Tierney, would you prefer to speak now or after the registrant speaks?
I can speak now, and I do believe there are registrants that...
There is one registrant, yes. Okay,
yeah.
If you would like to speak now, go ahead.
Yeah, so, well, basically, I was approached by HSA regarding this site. Back in 2018, they had looked at a different site on Vogus Road, but the site, for multiple reasons, ultimately didn't work out for them. So what they're proposing to do is procure 28 acres from GE Healthcare, and they want to build 3 environmentally friendly industrial buildings in a phased development on the property. The 3 buildings would be approximately 429,000 square feet, and the project value is just over $40 million. And one of the reasons I'm supporting this, or among the reasons I'm supporting this, is HSA with 3 buildings that would be providing manufacturing, assembly, distribution jobs. They anticipate 200 jobs being created on the site when all is said and done. These would be family supporting benefited jobs that will really help provide accessible jobs to families in my district that have had systemic poverty. And these are the kinds of jobs that when you look at the history of our city, that really built our city, built many neighborhoods in our city. We look at Rayovac or Oscar Mayer, those kinds of things where we had jobs that provided people that didn't have a college degree or a tech college degree, the ability to go to work and support their families. And I really feel that that's a necessary segment of our economy to not be overlooked. So that's why with the 200 jobs they're talking about creating, I'm excited about this. Another reason I'm supportive of the project is that they probably bring in about $700,000 per year in new property tax revenue. And the thing is, they aren't asking for a dime in public financing. So it's a benefit for our city taxpayers. The buildings with the modern methods of construction and everything, there will be a minimal draw for city services. And it is compliant with the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan. The company that's building it, I checked them out. They have a good reputation across the Midwest, and they have active projects in Milwaukee and Kenosha. So I didn't have any concerns with that. When they brought the neighborhood plan to my attention, what makes it something that I think we should resequence the events in terms of when the Omeda Drive extension would have to occur is because literally the HSA or any other entity that would develop the property that is currently part of GE Healthcare, they simply would not have a need to extend Omeda Drive. And right now, there aren't plans for development of the Blatterman property that's to the north. So whenever that property is developed and an east-west road would go through the Blatterman property, that's the time in my mind that we should be thinking about the Omeda Drive extension. And that is the time in my mind when we ought to then be looking at the entities that benefit from it, the landowners that benefit all, paying an equivalent, appropriate share of the cost for putting a roadway in. So basically, by amending the plan, we can enable a great development to occur at the current time. My concern is that if we don't amend the plan, not only do we not see this development and the jobs and the addition to our tax base in the city, but it's going to be detrimental to seeing anybody want to develop that property, because developers look at the parcel, even if they have a great proposal for it, like HSA does, something that absolutely fits in with what we'd like to see on that property. They aren't going to do it because of the requirement to extend a roadway, not only that they won't use, but really at this time it'd be a roadway to nowhere. It'd be extended up and it would dead end. And frankly, the only thing it would be used for in the immediate future is probably underage drinking parties or people going up and dumping things, because it would just be a dead end roadway that wouldn't be used or connected to anything else for the foreseeable future. So I'm hopeful we can get this plan amended, enable HSA to move forward, get a great development in place, and the development that will make that area attractive. And as other property owners in the area look to develop their properties in compliance with the Yahara Hills neighborhood plan, it'd be my hope the HSA development would serve as a boost and assist those other property owners in attracting development that fits in well. And then at that time, of course, that's when we can be looking at the extension of Omeda Drive and the connection with East-West Street. That's not on the not being considered for construction in any time in the immediate future. So, and thinking about this, I think, basically it's a very similar situation to like the Dairy Drive extension in my district, where the frontage road along the Beltline, where we've extended Dairy Drive through now when there's a need for it. It's just the basic premise that roads cost money, and they do place a burden on folks. And I think if we can compromise and allow this development to go forward, and get up and running and help us out as the city, in creating jobs, adding to our tax base, then when it's appropriate to extend the road and make it the connection, then we should do it at that time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder Tierney. We do have a registrant on this item, Phil Jennings, 614 West Doty Street, in support, wanting to speak, representing HSA Commercial Real Estate, 100 South Wacker Drive, Chicago, Illinois. Mr. Jennings.
Good evening.
Mr. Jennings, you will have 3 minutes. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening. I'm here to speak on behalf of HSA and in support of this plan. I'd like to focus on 4 points. I won't repeat what Alderman Tierney said, but I'll just amplify a few important points. First of all, HSA is very supportive of the Yahara Hills neighborhood plan. We think that the plan works. We've studied it very carefully. We have tried to tailor our development plan to meet the 4 corners of what we understand the plan to be, and in particular, this employment and industrial section within the plan. And I think the fact of the matter is that on the nuts and the bolts of our development plan, city staff is supportive of it. So we're confident with that, and we'd like to press ahead. Secondly, I think an important point here is that these are, in addition to the family supporting jobs that Alderman Tierney mentioned, these are jobs that are at a site that is supported by existing public transportation infrastructure. And so often in the city of Madison, we find that the net new family supporting jobs are outside of the city, and absent a regional transportation plan, we find it really hard for people that are seeking to climb their way up the economic ladder to actually get to where the jobs are unless they drive out of the city. This is an unusual situation. We're proposing a very ambitious, large-scale industrial development on and that is served by and on public transportation routes. So that should not be overlooked. And in fact, I think it's a core element of this plan. As to the matter of the Yahara Hills neighborhood plan and the transportation provisions, we think that the plan to improve Meyer Road, and we think that the connection between Meyer Road and Femrite Drive through an east-west extension, and then the improvements contemplated here, the north-south improvements to Omeda Drive, we think that all works. The problem is to see these as independent roadway projects is really missing the point. The Yahara Hills neighborhood plan calls for a cohesive development plan of new road infrastructure, something which we support. We know Mr. Blatterman thinks it's important, and we certainly are supportive of his development concept as we understand it, and we're supportive of what McAllen Properties intends to do. But to do this section of the road at great expense and not have that expense shared when it really serves no functional purpose for the proposed development is in a sense putting the cart before the horse. We would strongly urge the Plan Commission to consider underscoring the cohesive nature of this transportation plan, but sequencing it so it can be done in a comprehensive as opposed to a parceled out way.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. That concludes your 3 minutes. Are there any questions of the registrants by commissioners? I see no raised hands. Are there any questions of Mr. Grady? Commissioner Sundquist.
Thank you. And for everyone else's reminder, I was on the TPPB, so I've heard this before, and so have been through it once before. Mr. Grady, as I recall from that and from what you just said, the applicant and the Alder just talked about sequencing it, but city staff essentially said there wasn't any way to do that with our current policy, right? It's like the item before us is to take it out of the plan, not to do it at a different time.
That's correct. The applicant approached the city inquiring if there was a way to defer construction of the road, but we just don't have that. Our city's subdivision regulations are set up where as you build things, you build the infrastructure called for it in the city plans and policies. And so, that's our only opportunity right now. Our only option would be to take it out of the plan, and if it goes out of the plan, then it just would not get built.
And as I recall, there is at least a little way a partial way to sequence the construction in that you only require them to do half the road. So they don't do curb and gutter on both sides, just on the one side, and enough for cars to get, just as the minimum needed for 2 lanes, but you don't have to build the entire facility, correct?
Yeah, Chris, that's how you turn the camera on. Feel free. This is kind of your wheelhouse.
Mr. Pedikowski, do you have something to add?
Yeah, that would be correct. We would not need the roadway built to full standards. We would not need the curb and gutter on the east side, and we would just need a minimum amount of pavement, enough to have two-way traffic.
Okay. And then if this were taken out of the plan, then what I imagine would happen, I think what the discussion was, is that you end up with a bunch of parcels that have long driveways running to them, essentially off of the arterials, as opposed to a more gridded arrangement that the plan calls for now. Is that correct?
Mr. Grady?
That's correct. And so, yeah, there'd be a series of long driveways that kind of tentacle back to the arterials, and the Blattermans, who own the property to the north, as well as the McCallans on the property immediately to the east, indicated that they would like to have access to this planned road, and it could limit the amount of development on their properties if it's difficult to get to their back part. So that's the thought with this Omeda Drive extension, the east-west road. You're opening up more development opportunity for more development in the long term. And if the road doesn't go through, that could minimize how much development takes place. And certainly you lose the circulation, as you mentioned, the benefits of the gridded street pattern for cars, ped bikes, and utilities as well.
And access to transit that the applicant was talking about. So, okay, I think those are the main points I wanted to make. I could talk a little bit more during discussion, but those were my questions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Sundquist. Commissioner Solheim.
I have a couple questions. The first, so it looks like Omeda Drive currently is just a small section, and then the driveway extends from where the proposed road would be. And the staff report mentioned that Omeda Drive was likely put in to connect to the old Meyer Road, which has since been vacated. And I was just curious, based on kind of current policy, if that initial section of Omeda would have been required if there wasn't, Meyer Road in there. And also, why was Meyer Road vacated? I'm just curious if, without that being there, if they could have just had a driveway and not been in this position.
Mr. Grady?
It may have been a while ago, but curious if you have any insight.
Yeah, so we did look into that and kind of figure out what happened out here. And so some colleagues did a little research, and let me just share my screen here really quickly. Hopefully you're seeing a map with a whole bunch of aerial photo.
Yes.
So you can kind of see on here. So this is a kind of a composite. Throw everything into the pot and see what kind of map you come up with. But it has a lot of information. So here's the applicant's site plan. Their project here, existing GE buildings. The McCallans own this. They've developed this lot here. This is the Blattermans. Old Meyer Road used to, I think, did this, and then it kind of came down here at an angle. You can see where it used to be located. Old Meyer Road came in at basically a 45 off of Femrite. When GE located out here, which is going back to the almost like late 60s, early 70s, rather than having this road cross at that sharp angle, the city worked with them. I don't know who all went down, all the details, but they basically squared it up. And so they vacated this segment. They put in this segment of Omeda Drive. That then connected to Old Meyer Road, which provided access to these homes that they needed to keep providing access to. So basically, it's got rid of this angled leg of it and squared it up with Omeda Drive. And then now, back in like 2005 or so, the town of Blooming Grove vacated this part. And so now you just have Meyer Road do this and Omeda Drive do that. And so we're in this plan, we're just kind of working off these square shapes for this new street. So that's kind of the history there.
Okay, thank you. That was really helpful. And just to clarify, and talking about building, just half of the road, my understanding is they would still have to install all of the utilities, correct? As well as sidewalk for all of that extension.
That's correct. So yeah, they, as Chris mentioned, and this is just kind of the way it works with development, the first entity in, if you have a road on a shared property line like we have here, you're the first entity to develop, you end up paying for a little more than half. We try to keep it equal as possible, but enough to get two-way traffic in there. So yeah, they would build the full western sidewalk, curb gutter, enough to get two-way traffic there. And then the developer on the other side would finish that off. That's a very commonplace situation as things are developing in the city. And then yes, the other advantage of, in addition to roads providing access to development, circulation for peds, bikes, vehicles, we would also, if Omeda Drive is extended with this project, we locate the water main, sanitary main, and also storm sewer in that same right of way. And so that's how these properties we built would be served with utilities, basically. That is a benefit to the city because then we can just go on right away, in a road right away to repair if needed those utilities, whether it's emergency or long-term maintenance. We can do that in a street. If Omeda Drive is not extended through this project, then all utilities would come off of FEMRIGHT in private easements through this development to serve the three buildings they're showing.
Do you have any further questions?
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you. I may have erroneously lowered your hand. Alder Hack, did you have questions? No. Okay. Moving on then, Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, my question is, I guess, for staff. Has anyone considered creating a TIF district here so that those public improvements could be incorporated in a TIF district? It seems like this would be a perfect spot because you're creating $40 million of development and 250 jobs. It seems like an industrial TIF district would be perfect. And those improvements could be paid for with the increment of this development.
Yeah, the applicant and the alder did inquire with city staff, and we just do not have one TIF district in this location. Maybe at some point in the future there could be one, but at this time there's not one, and obviously there's a process to create one. I forget all the details if there was a kind of city perspective on moving forward with one here or not, but we just don't have one now, and so the development that's been taking place out here, and there has been some over the last 10 years, has been happening outside of a TIF district.
You know, I understand it. You may not have one now, but it doesn't take a long time to create a TIF district, probably 3 or 4 months. And I know there's timing and, negotiations that occur, but this is a pretty significant development. And having a street network that could provide other spots for other industrial development seems like a win-win here. So I guess I don't quite understand why the city isn't jumping up and down saying, yeah, we're going to work with you and get this done.
Mr. Parks has raised his hand to comment. Mr. Parks?
I suspect I raised my hands for the same reason that Mr. Pedikowski may have jumped in, so I defer to Chris.
Oh, I didn't see a raised hand there, but either one.
Basically, we did discuss that in the spring, and the street, if the city builds the extension of Omeda Drive with or without the extension to the east to Meyer Road, however that road section comes to be, whether as part of the same project or through development or a separate project, we cannot use TIF to pay for something that we would otherwise get through assessment. So if the city builds the streets, they would be assessed to the benefiting property owners and would not therefore be eligible wouldn't be an eligible TIF expenditure. And I'll leave it there. And I don't know if Mr. Pedikowski has something else he wants to add to that.
Mr. Pedikowski, did you want to add anything to Mr. Parks' description?
That's just what I was going to add, in this case, since it's a new roadway that gets assessed to adjacent owners, you can't use the TIF funds for that new roadway. So it doesn't really help in this case.
I must not know TIF law then, because that's, unless Madison is doing something different. So anyway, I'm surprised to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Tierney.
Thank you. There's two things that I guess I'd like to reiterate that, if we don't amend the plan, then the status quo with the slight offshoot of Omeda Drive off of Femright, that's going to be in place for however long it takes before other development occurs in the neighborhood, because I really don't foresee a development occurring on the GE property, because nobody's going to look at the expense of doing a Omeda Drive extension and then look at a map and see the cost that they're being asked to foot for road that simply isn't necessary. It doesn't serve their development. It's something that I think will be stuck, in the status quo for a long time. And the other thing, when I look at the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan in general, and when you look at the proposed additional dwelling units and new employment, I would just emphasize that we have to do things in the city to increase our tax base, because like right now, with the way things stand, if somebody tomorrow came to me and said, we want to build 3,000 houses under the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan, I wouldn't support that, because our city has not kept pace in terms of when we allow developments to go through. We have not kept pace with providing basic services, police, fire, EMS. And in my district, the lack of ambulance in the southeast portion of the district, it's a serious issue for my constituents. So if we don't do things to grow our tax base so that we have the operational revenues necessary to do things like have ambulance crews and that, it's something that we can talk about neighborhood development plans and increasing the number of neighborhoods in the city and the need for these services. But if we don't have a way to pay for them, I think residents of my district who already worry about how long it takes for ambulance service, they're going to say no. We don't want additional neighborhood plans, and it's something that I think we have to recognize that there is a need to try to increase our tax base and provide the operational revenues that we need to provide basic services that in my part of the city, oftentimes we aren't doing. And I think, there have been some issues in the past, I think, with the way planning was done and not taking into account the need for fire, ambulance, police, et cetera. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm supportive of this plan, to do this amendment so that we can get the development necessary to increase our tax base and then be able to provide, the services that people desperately need. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder Tierney. Alder Heck.
Thank you. This is perhaps for Mr. Petitowski. I'm not sure. Has staff kind of scoped approximately what the cost to do these utilities in this, I'll call it 2/3 of a road, might be for this developer?
Yeah, I have sent the developer an estimate, and I apologize. I have to search my emails here to find the numbers. Might take me a second.
Thanks. I think we heard that from Alder Tierney, this was an approximately $40 million project. So I'm kind of wondering how the cost of the utilities and the road compare to the overall cost of the project.
Looks like I had 700,000 for the street, 900 for the sanitary, 400,000 for the water, and 300,000 for storm, for a total of 2.3 million.
So that's about maybe 5% plus. So that's like adding another 6 or 7% or something to the project costs. And okay, that's good.
I should say those are those are rough estimates. There's certainly things we could do to try to trim costs, but that I didn't want to start out with that at this point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. That's my only question.
Commissioner Solheim.
It's been discussed that this neighborhood plan is fairly recent, I think 3 years old, and I'm just curious. I know that this is typical of our neighborhood plan process, that large landowners, especially like these, are a part of the process. So I just was curious if you had, recollection of GE, the current owner, being involved in that process, and if they were aware, or how aware, that this road extension would affect them and that they would be responsible for paying that.
Mr. Grady, do you have information on that?
Yeah, I feel like I think I recall just in prepping for this amendment, going back through our feedback that we received after notifying property owners. I feel like there was a meeting, or at least some communication with GE representatives back in 2016, 17 to the plan, but I don't remember the details. But yeah, we do a pretty extensive notification process. Early on, we'll notify before we start the NDP. And then we probably did a second one as it came closer to the BCC Board Commission Committee review of the plan. And so, yeah, I don't remember the details. The Blattermans, I remember they were very involved, advocating for showing development on their property and then streets that come along with that. The McCallans are very invested in development out here. And so, yeah, with GE, I'm not sure if they contemplated plans back then, but they do have excess land as this proposal kind of evidences. And I think they also have additional excess land to the north of their existing buildings that could benefit as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. I mean, I know that there's a lot of notification to, property owners, and I'm not questioning that. It's just, sometimes it's another jump to realizing that this isn't just a plan affecting my property, but could be payment of that road. So thank you for that feedback. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there further? Yes. Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. Question for staff. Just to be clear, so if we approve this amendment tonight, is there really no way for us to require this developer to pay for this road later on if development triggers the need for it?
Yeah, I think that would just be the final answer. And so part of the deferment is the reason we don't allow streets and infrastructure to be deferred is because if you defer them, the odds of them actually happening are greatly reduced. And so we just don't defer things. We try to, as development occurs, as you develop area, you bring the infrastructure along with it, streets, utilities. You do the next chunk, you bring the next chunk of utilities and streets. And so if we take the plan out, which is the purpose of bringing this to the Plan Commission this evening, eventually come to council tomorrow, take it out of the plan, this development would move forward, presumably without the street. The folks on the other side of Omeda Drive would not want to volunteer to build it either if one party didn't have to build it. And so this would move forward. There would not be right of way there. It would not get built, and that would be the answer. And so that's our main reason for bringing it to the kind of city BCC process, is to weigh in on the value of that road. If it's not built now, it will not get built. And even if we were a way to seek out a deferment of this, there's still a good chance it won't get built in that case either.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Did you have any other questions?
No, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, is there any general discussion? I would be looking then for a motion. Commissioner Sundquist.
Would move that we accept the TPPB recommendation to place this on file.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Cantrell. Commissioner Sundquist, did you wish to speak to your motion?
I think most of the points have been made. I mean, Alder Tierney all his points in favor of this development and the applicant are correct. I appreciate the effort that Mr. Cantrell made to maybe find a way to do it with TIF. That was something that hadn't come up before, but apparently it had come up within staff. And I'm with him. I'm not sure, if that's a Madison ordinance or state law that precludes it, but I'll take it that it is true and that doesn't work. So all the benefits are there, but where Alder Tierney's argument doesn't work is that he says we should sequence it, but we've heard from staff that there isn't any way to sequence it. So, I mean, if this stays in the plan and the Alder could work with his colleagues to come up with some new policy that allows for sequencing of projects like this, that might be a good outcome, because it is, this is something that developers face all the time. Every developer who comes in, the first one in has certain responsibilities. Sometimes the last one in gets extra, problems because of transportation impacts or something like that. So it's the burdens aren't always as spread out as we would really like. And if there is policy to improve that process, then that would be good. But until we have that, this is what we have. And if we're going to start backing off and pulling parts of plans apart to accommodate one developer, we should, we're on a pretty slippery slope. And again, this road was put in here for a reason, to allow access to the properties around this one. The developer again talked about the access to transit, which would, be diminished if all we had was big driveways that go off of the main streets. So the plan is a decent plan, but it's not going to happen if we let people, back out of it. And it's, so that I think we should not do that. And if there is a way to develop the policy in the meantime to accommodate the deferral, then that would be great. But I just don't see it right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sundquist. Is there any further comment or discussion about this item? I do not see any raised hands. We have a motion and a second to place on file. I will assume unanimous consent of that motion unless I see a raised hand to object. Mr. Parks, did you have a question?
Just to clarify whether it's the intent of the commission to place on file with or without prejudice for the action for the council meeting tomorrow night. Thank you.
I heard to place on file. I did not hear without prejudice. Commissioner Sundquist.
And could staff remind me whether TPPB was specific on that?
TPPB was just placed on file. Maybe I should have asked the same question, but it was just placed on file.
I guess I should be easy on it, and in case something unforeseen happens, say without prejudice, but I wouldn't foresee this as a good proposal. Just now I'm editorializing. Don't think without something new, this still passes muster, but say without prejudice.
Okay, so the motion is to place on file without prejudice. To place on file without prejudice. I'm going to assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. I see no raised hands to object, so the motion does pass unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Then we are now into public hearings. And it is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval, with all of the conditions placed upon it by various city departments, on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item. Also on the consent agenda are items being referred. So these items are placed onto a consent agenda and they are addressed at the beginning of our public hearing section. People here on those items then will know what the outcome is and can go home, but they are already home, but sign out. Unless a member of the commission requests separation, in which case the item is removed from the consent agenda and taken in the regular course of business. Of the items before us today, the following are proposed for the consent agenda. Agenda item 15 and 16, agenda items 19 and 20, and then for referral, agenda item 10, agenda item 11, agenda item 17 and 18, those are newly on for referral, and agenda item 21. Are there any requests for separation? Seeing no requests for separation.
Chair
Yes.
Zellers?
Yes.
Could we please specify the referral dates for these? I think there are specific dates requested for.
I will.
Oh, thank you.
Do that as I go through each item. Thank you. So the first item, which is on for referral, is agenda item 10, Legistar 60914, creating section 28.022 through 00454 of the Madison General Ordinances to change zoning of property located at 4000 to 4150 Packers Avenue and 4201 North Sherman Avenue in Alder District 12, from temporary agricultural to suburban residential consistent district. And several other items which you can see then on the agenda. And agenda item 10 and 11 are related, and they are both then referred to October 19th, 2020 at the request of the applicant and district Alder. So that's agenda item 10 and 11. Agenda item 15, Legistar 61596, is to be considered together with agenda item 16, Legistar 61385, creating section 28.022 through 00465 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 5801 Cottage Grove Road, 16th Alder District, from agricultural district to suburban residential consistent district, and located at 5801 Cottage Grove Road, consideration of a conditional use in the proposed suburban residential consistent district for an accessory building exceeding 800 square feet of area to allow construction of a 1,600 square foot detached garage. And then also for referral to our next Plan Commission meeting, which I believe is October 5th. Agenda item 17 and 18. 17, Legistar 61669, located at 1313 Regent Street, 13 Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional shopping street district to construct a mixed-use building with greater than 24 dwelling units, consideration of a mixed-use building with less than 75% non-residential ground floor, consideration of a rear or side yard height transition to residential districts exceeding the height and or ratio limitation, consideration of the building that exceeds 3 stories and 40 feet in height, consideration of a building exceeding 25,000 square feet of floor area for a mixed-use or multi-tenant building, consideration of an alteration to an outdoor eating area, consideration of an alteration to an outdoor recreation area, and consideration of a parking reduction of more than 20 vehicle parking spaces and 25% or more of the required parking to allow a 3-story addition above and behind an existing 10,377 square foot 1-story commercial building. And then associated with that is approval of a certified survey map. And then for approval on the consent agenda, agenda item 19, Legistar 61670, located at 4026 Rockwell Drive, 15th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional residential consistent 1 district for accessory buildings exceeding 10% of a lot area to allow construction of an accessory building. Agenda item 20, Legistar 61671, located at 5120 Spring Court, 19th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use for lakefront development to allow construction of an accessory building. And then for referral, agenda item 21, Legistar 61617, located at 429 North Patterson Street, 2nd Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional residential consistent 4 district for an accessory building exceeding 576 square feet and 10% of lot area, and consideration of a conditional use in the TRC 4 district for an accessory dwelling unit to allow construction of a 700 square foot accessory dwelling unit with an accessory dwelling unit. My understanding is that agenda item 21 for referral also would be referred to our next Plan Commission. No, I'm seeing no. Could you clarify, Ms. Stouter, when that is to be referred to?
Yes, item 21 would be referred to October 19th.
October 19th. Thank you. Got it. Okay, those are the items on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Alder or Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. Are there any questions, comments? Seeing none, I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. I see no raised hands to object. Motion passes unanimously to approve the consent agenda. Thank you. Okay, moving on. The next item on our public hearing agenda is agenda item 9, Legistar 61588, amending the Marsh Road Neighborhood Development Plan and City of Madison official map to modify the recommended street network and greenways for the portion of the planning area bounded by Voges Road, South Stoughton Road, Trade Winds Parkway, and Agricultural Drive, Marsh Road. And we do have a presentation by Mr. Parks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Plan Commission. Brief primer on the official map and what we're doing tonight with item number 9. Got to start at the start. Basically, just a quick overview of what the official map is, because it's a seldom used tool of recent years in terms of how we reserve property for future public works. But it's a planning tool that's enabled by state statute and by Madison General Ordinance. And it may be more or less detailed than similar recommendations in a special area or neighborhood plan. And basically what reservation on an official map does is allow a municipality to map and reserve land for future streets, transportation corridors, public buildings, parks, greenways, etc. And the enforcement mechanism, at least in the city, is that building permits may not be issued to construct a structure within a reserved area shown on the official map. What the official map is not is the actual land needed to construct the future public improvement. And the reservation that is shown on the official map does not necessarily reflect all of the land that may be needed for the future improvement. Details on that future improvement, whatever it might be, so things like street cross sections, pond depths, project aesthetics, etc., will be determined in the future, subject to subsequent approvals. The city must acquire land shown on the official map, anything that's needed to construct that future improvement, whatever it is. And that would typically be done either as a dedication to the public through subdivision of land, very similar to what we were just talking about with the Yahara Hills neighborhood plan discussion and Omeda Drive. The other option would be for that acquisition to occur by the city, either of land or of easement. And any such dedications or acquisitions would require separate common council approval. And just a quick overview of how it works. The official map was adopted by the city in 1966. It's broken into quarter sections, and there's a map that is adopted for each quarter section. And the map for each section may only be amended by a resolution of the common council following notice published in the city's paper of record and notices mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the area that's subject to amendment. And then just a quick overview of the specific request that's before you tonight. The image towards the top of the map reflects the official map as it has existed since the early 1970s. And this is for an area of the existing and future city bounded on the south by Voges Road, Marsh Road on the east, Tradewinds Parkway, not quite the Beltline on the north, and then Stoughton Road, Highway 51 on the west. And the areas that are in red candy striping are the various reservations that have existed for this area of the city since the early 1970s, including an area for future north-south road, realignment of existing Dutch Mill Road, a greenway or parkway that kind of cleaves in a sort of hook-like fashion through a large chunk of that pink outlined area. And then a section of land roughly not quite 400 feet in width that extends along the eastern edge of the Dane County Humane Society property that was reserved for a north-south street to go somewhere within that 400 feet. It's not actually ultimately a 400-foot reservation. It's just basically a very, very large holding or reservation that we put on that property until we could come to a future resolution on where a second north-south road would go between Voges Road and what is now Tradewinds Parkway. So just a quick look at what we're, hoping to do with the amendment that's before you tonight, which is both for the neighborhood development plan as well as for the official map. The official map may be a little more specific, and that amendment perhaps requiring a little more attention is basically to release the greenway that extended sort of hook-like east-west through a large chunk of this area because we no longer need it. The city has, since the adoption of the official map, acquired the area in green that extends through the site that I'm kind of following with my cursor. That's a Pinedo Creek Greenway that was acquired roughly 20 years ago. The rest of that reservation is no longer needed, according to the city engineer and the staff of that department. And then the two north-south streets have been refined to address the city's future transportation needs in what we feel is a more logical manner while reserving more of the two large properties that those reservations currently affect for future development. So whereas on the previous map, we had what would effectively be an extension of Galleon Run as platted off of Tradewinds Parkway, just running straight south to Voges Road like we had it mapped in around 1970, we'll say. We're now going to try to swing it closer to that new greenway that we acquired. And secondarily, where we had the tieback of what is Dutch Mill Road very close to that new north-south street on the western edge of what is the Dahl property at 4800. We're now moving that a little further north to an area that we feel will better allow development on the properties effectively between Crossroads Church and Toby's Supper Club, if you're looking for landmarks out there, and freeing up a pretty large piece of developable property on the Dahl parcel. And then similarly, nailing down where that north-south street would cross the Humane Society property, relieving them of that 400 or nearly 400-foot reservation on their property and identifying where we believe a future right-of-way could go for that second north-south street. And in doing so, in both cases, taking into account the topographical constraints that exist in this area. It's not the Marsh Road neighborhood plan by accident. This area has a lot of hydric soils, a lot of wetlands, a lot of floodplain. And so the road is named after a topographic condition, not the name of a pleasant old farmer. So we're trying to address that as well by identifying roads that we believe can be built, taking into account the situation on the ground or in the ground as the case may be. And then secondarily, here's the neighborhood plan as adopted in 1999 that generally shows roads extending not necessarily in a logical manner. We would kind of tie things together a little better than what you see on the adopted map. This is a blend of how it was adopted plus how things have been platted. So that explains the disconnect. And then just secondarily showing, like you saw with the official map exhibit just above, showing those new roads, kind of piecing things together a little more holistically. So with that, that's just a very brief overview of the request. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. I will open the public hearing. We do not, I do not show any registrants on this item. Is that still correct, Ms. Stouter? Yes. So I will close the public hearing. Are there any questions of Mr. Parks? I do not see any raised hands. Could I get a motion, please? Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I'll recommend that the Plan Commission approve the Marshall Road Neighborhood Development Plan and the city's of Madison's official map to modify the recommended street network and greenways as recommended by staff.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Sundquist. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thanks.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing no raised hands, I will assume unanimous consent unless someone raises their hand to object. I see no raised hands to object. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Parks, for that overview. Moving on, then, the next items are on the agenda are items 12, 13, and 14, which are related and will be considered together. Item 12, Legistar 61594, creating section 28.022 through 00464 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 209 Cottage Grove Road, 15th Alder District, from Commercial Corridor Transitional District to Neighborhood Mixed Use District. Agenda item 13, Legistar 61384. 109 through 209 Cottage Grove Road and 3900 Monona Drive, 15th Alder District. Consideration of a demolition permit to demolish 3 commercial buildings. Consideration of a conditional use in the proposed Neighborhood Mixed Use District to construct a mixed use building with greater than 24 dwelling units. Consideration of a conditional use in the Neighborhood Mixed Use District for a building exceeding 10,000 square feet floor area that contains 2 or more uses. Consideration of a conditional use in the NMX District for a multi-family dwelling with greater than 8 units. Consideration of a conditional use in the NMX District for a mixed-use building with less than 75% non-residential ground floor area. Consideration in the NMX District of a building with a street facing width greater than 40 feet that at least 75% of the ground floor frontage facing the primary street be non-residential unless approved as a conditional use, and consideration of a conditional use in the NMX District for a building exceeding 3 stories and 40 feet to construct a 4-story mixed-use building with 2,500 square feet of commercial space and 78 apartments and a 4-story apartment building with 110 units. Agenda item 14, Legistar 61387, approving a certified survey map of property owned by Prime Urban Properties, LLC, located at 109 through 209 Cottage Grove Road and 3900 Monona Drive, 15th Alder District. And we again have a presentation by Mr. Parks on this proposal. Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Plan Commission. Items 12, 13, and 14 involve a request by Prime Urban Properties to demolish 3 one-story commercial buildings at 3900 Monona Drive, 109 and 209 Cottage Grove Road, to allow construction of a 4-story mixed-use building on the western half of the site closest to Monona Drive. That would include 2,500 square feet of ground floor commercial space along Monona Drive, and 78 apartments, including 4 live-work units along the Cottage Grove Road frontage. And then secondly, to build on the easterly half of the site, a 4-story, 110-unit apartment building on the property. The project proposes 188 overall dwelling units, as well as the proposed commercial space. And it would be served by 193 underground automobile parking stalls and 38 parking stalls, 14 adjacent to the western building, 24 adjacent to the eastern building, effectively between the eastern building and the eastern property line. And the project would also have 212 bicycle parking stalls. The project would be built with the western building first, followed by the eastern building. The applicant is requesting just a summary of the 3 approvals. At the present time, 209 Cottage Grove Road is zoned CCT. The applicant is requesting NMX zoning, which is the zoning of the 109 Cottage Grove Road and 3900 Monona Drive parcels. The demolition of the 3 buildings, and then the various conditional uses noted by the chair during the introduction. Staff believes that the project is generally consistent with adopted plan recommendations for the site and surroundings per the 2018 comprehensive plan, which recommends the site in its entirety for neighborhood mixed use, as well as the Cottage Grove activity centers, which was adopted in 2017 to provide land use, economic development, and design recommendations for the Cottage Grove Road corridor, most primarily for the Atwood Avenue intersection, and also for the Acewood Boulevard intersection. There are specific recommendations for those 2 activity centers. Staff believes that the project should not have an adverse impact on uses, values, and enjoyment, or the normal and orderly development of surrounding properties, and that the various requests can meet the standards for approval, including the request for both buildings to exceed the 3-story and 40-foot height threshold in the neighborhood mixed-use district. In reviewing the project, however, staff recommends that the applicant work with staff to better orient the development to Cottage Grove Road by addressing the grade separation between the sidewalk and first floor of both buildings, most particularly Building 1, which in addition to the ground floor commercial facing Monona Drive, also has the 4 live-work units along the Cottage Grove Road frontage of Building 1. There is approximately 5 to 6 feet of grade separation between the first floor of the building and the public sidewalk on Cottage Grove Road. And staff would really strongly encourage to better orient the building to the public realm, that efforts be made to reduce, if not eliminate, the grade difference between Building 1 and the sidewalk. Staff is concerned that the grade separation will limit the accessibility to and therefore the viability of those live-work units. And we also feel that it will better activate the Cottage Grove Road frontage if the building is lowered, and secondarily that step-free access to those live-work spaces be provided. At the present time, the exterior entrance to all 4 of those spaces is via stairs from the public sidewalk. And then also noted in the report, but not a specific condition of approval, we have asked the applicant to consider whether they might heighten the building at the Monona Drive frontage. Right now, there's a step back above the 3rd floor. We actually feel that more height could be tolerated at this corner, that it's overall a well-designed project, but that it could be more impactful, better frame the Monona Cottage Grove intersection and create a stronger gateway at the western end of the Cottage Grove Road corridor. So with that, we are recommending approval of the request subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report, both for the land use approvals on page 10 and for the one lot certified survey map beginning on page 21. I'd be happy to answer any questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. I will open the public hearing. We do have several registrants. The first registrant is Kevin Burrow, 7601 University Avenue, Middleton, Wisconsin, in support, wishing to speak, representing Kanothi Bruce Architects. And Mr. Burrow, you will have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Parks, if you could put up our presentation, please.
I haven't received that presentation, Kevin. Unfortunately, it did not come through.
I emailed it twice. Okay. What option do we have at this point? Do you have the submittal?
I'll pull something up here. Did you have anything in particular that you wanted me to focus on?
Yeah, well, we actually submitted revised renderings showing added height per your previous conversation or previous comments just made here.
Okay.
So I sent it through a couple times to you. I apologize that it hasn't gone through.
Madam Chair, if appropriate, we could perhaps consider taking other registrants and
I think that's a good idea.
Seeing if we could get this email.
Yeah. We'll move on, Mr. Burrow, and hopefully we can get that presentation to accompany your testimony. The next registrant is Adam Vans Pankeren of 309 Dempsey Road, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. And you got the pronunciation of my name right, which is awesome.
Oh.
All right. Thanks for recognizing me. I don't really think luxury apartments are in line with the spirit of the adopted plans. They might be in line with the letter, but I really think that they undermine the character and culture of the Cottage Grove Atwood area, which undermines the character and culture of Madison. But I really would like to take the time to focus on the commercial space. Just looking at the plan, 32,000 to 2,500 is grossly insufficient for cultivating local business. And if you look down the road at Royster Commons, like that space is not being used at all because of the way it's been set up. And 2,500 would be enough for a corner coffee shop at most, which there already is an excellent coffee shop right there anyway. So I think it would be better served to, I'd actually like the following conditions considered to be added. To increase the amount of available ground floor commercial space from 2,500 to 10,000. And also there's a safety concern as the connecting road between Cottage Grove and Milwaukee Street is Dempsey. And there's already speeding and traffic concerns there. A lot of pedestrians, a lot of children, a lot of dogs. So if we could add traffic calming measures to Dempsey Street, Dempsey Road, or redirect the through traffic to maintain pedestrian children safety in the adjacent neighborhoods, I would really like it if those two conditions were considered along with this proposal.
Does that conclude your testimony?
It does.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next registrant who wishes to speak is Yila Shoshane of 4215 Bainbridge Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I would like to second what Adam Van Sprinkeren said about the commercial space. We're bringing densification to what has historically been a semi-suburban area, and we're bringing it up to urban density, which I personally am all for. But there's urban and then there's urban. So in my mind, what Monona has done in that same neighborhood is build very dense buildings. And I won't say they're a neighborhood because they aren't. There's no services. There's no connection. They serve to cut off, actually, the neighborhood from the lake. And so I think the neighborhood's at something of a tipping point. And if a whole bunch of more apartments go up, basically right across the street from all that Monona non-neighborhood development, then there isn't going to be a neighborhood left, especially if there's no commercial space. So while I'm in favor of having urban densification, I think urban densification requires urban services, and urban services are retail. And what you have on the Monona buildings, which this evidently seeks to emulate, is lots of cars going in and out because there's no place to walk to in the neighborhood. And I really would not like to see the Mononification of Madison. So I agree with the previous speaker. And I also want to say that while I was listening to testimony earlier, Commissioner Sundquist said something, and I'm going to quote him. He said, pulling parcel plans apart to support certain developments, if we did that, we'd be on a slippery slope. And until now, there's always been a requirement for a certain amount of commercial, and this is an exception, I believe. It doesn't have near the amount of commercial that Royster has, or even the new supported housing, which is right across the street. And it's really not going to make a neighborhood. It's just going to be bedrooms with cars. And that's the slums of tomorrow, essentially. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. And perhaps we have Mr. Burrows ready to go now. Mr. Parks?
I pieced together a little bit from what's in your packet that hopefully will work as a presentation for the project. So if we might give Mr. Burrow an extra minute in his, since he doesn't know what I'm about to show, and this isn't whose line is it anyway, that we might just, let him kind of stumble through what I'm going to try and share with you here.
Okay.
Which is
the exceptional circumstance, we will be willing to listen for a possibility of a little bit more time.
Okay.
Mr. Burrow?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. So I appreciate your time this evening, and hopefully that presentation does make its way through. What we are proposing, as Mr. Parks presented, is a mixed-use building where we have commercial located on the western end of the building, and then also the live work units along the northern side along Cottage Grove Road. What you see in front of you is the overall site layout. We have divided this into two separate buildings, and then the architecture in itself is actually divided into three unique architectural looks for this property. If you can go to the next slide. Here's a view looking down Cottage Grove Road where you can see the complex of what appears to be three buildings. We're at the far eastern end right now with the 110 unit building. Next slide. So a little closer view of that end of the building. You can keep going. So here's the divider between the two buildings where we now have the gateway into the main entry of this building, which would be the lobby space for this portion. And then on the right-hand side is the second portion of the building. And further to the right is then to the drive to the underground parking as well. So this is the view looking now at the next building where we've got the four-story element along Cottage Grove Road here. And this specific end is actually a two-bedroom unit, but immediately adjacent to that is a series of the live work units that run down the entire frontage of this portion of the building then. So here you can get a view of what those live work units are. What we've done is widen the staircases up to those units to be 6 feet wide, to be more generous with regards to the easy access up to their units. And these units are also handicap accessible via the interior corridor system within the building. So any visitors to these live work units would have access directly into the building through the main lobby space. You can go to the next slide. Here's the end view of the building at the intersection of Cottage Grove Road and Monona Drive, where Atwood Avenue takes off. In the updated design that we've created, we've actually taken this curved element and made it a full four-story element, which wraps up and captures the corner and does provide what we feel is a strong gateway element to this neighborhood. And so that would be a full four-story element on the end within that curved section of the building. One thing we wanted to highlight as well is regards to the outdoor patio spaces that you can see along this commercial space, both along Cottage Grove Road and Monona Drive. And then each of the live-work units have also been designed with wider patios such that they have outdoor gathering space in front of their apartments. So in midst of this COVID environment that we're in, that we have the opportunity for them to be able to hold outdoor meetings directly in front of their space outside of their unit, adjacent to their patio leading up to their space. Was that the last slide that you had pulled together, Tim?
I have Monona Drive showing now, and I think I basically have all of the renderings, and then I have some of the site plans at the end of the presentation. So if you need the landscaping or grading or anything like that.
Okay, I just got an email from Heather Starr that she did receive the presentation. If there's an opportunity to show the updated renderings, that would be advantageous, just so we can assure you that we have taken the comments.
Okay, that was your 3 minutes, but we will go ahead and give you then an extra minute considering the difficulty. And so, Mr. Parks, if you could share then the screen so Mr. Burrow can show the updated renderings.
I can pull it up pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Oh no, Tim has it, okay.
All right, thank you. So now you can see the updated design as to how we have expanded the community room, which is up on the 4th floor. So the area immediately to the left of this, or to the right on your screen, is the outdoor gathering space for all residents. And then now this is a much stronger element. If you could go down to the next couple of renderings. There's a backside again, framing that view. Next image, please. So here again, you can see the strength of how that now anchors the corner. One more slide. This represents those patios that I was just describing as far as access to the live-work units. We do have opportunity for signage over each of the apartments or their live-work spaces, and then have these outdoor patio spaces available in addition to their traditional patio that they would have, so that you have the opportunity for the outdoor gathering space. So we are willing to work with staff with regards to the placement of the buildings grade-wise. We are handicapped a little bit with regards to the grade on the southern side of the building and the elevation of the parking lot with the existing storm sewer systems. So we are coordinating with our civil engineer on that regards, and he is available tonight as well to perhaps answer any specific questions with regards to the elevations for site drainage in regards to the first floor elevations for these buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Burrow. That concludes your extra time. Thank you. Our next registrant is Sally Young, 4112 Major Avenue, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Ms. Young.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to speak. This is practically in my backyard, for those of you that don't know where my address was. And I'm frankly at a loss to understand how this project is going to serve the neighborhood in a, and I quote, walkable, well-connected, integrated way. It's a beautiful building, but it looks like it belongs on East Wash, not in this little humble working class neighborhood. And as a result of that, the loss of sort of low tech, affordable retail space, I think, is going to be very serious impact on the neighborhood. I used to go to the Ace Hardware at least once a week, the Ben Franklin once a week, and I'm not sure that I will be able to afford any of the more upscale retail spaces that are going to be provided, which is a real loss to that goal of having a walkable, well-connected project in the neighborhood. I get my hair cut at Hair Majesty down there across the street from the new library. They've been there 40 years, and they are very clear that they don't expect they will be able to afford any of the retail spaces that are coming into Cottage Grove Road. So they'll expect to go out of business. And I think that's a serious consideration. in addition to all the other considerations that have already been listed. The other thing is I fail to see how there can be any claim that there's not going to be a negative impact on traffic on that area. Right now, crossing Cottage Grove Road, even with the walk signal, is very difficult because people are so frustrated by the backup on Monona Drive that they will turn right in front of you, even if you have a walk sign. On top of that, there's going to be people coming and going both from the Grove and this project that are making left-hand turns onto Cottage Grove Road in a constant willy-nilly fashion. And I just don't see how you can think that there's not going to be any impact on the traffic. So I guess my last question is, why do we have these zoning restrictions and neighborhood plans and all that effort when, as somebody else has mentioned, we have the slippery slope where we get a developer who wants to do his own thing, and we work to accommodate all those changes to the zoning and the neighborhood plan.
Thank you, Ms. Young. That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Linda Lawler, 3905 Monona Drive, Monona, Wisconsin, opposed and wishing to speak. Ms. Lawler.
Yes, I agree with Sally 100%. Thank you for letting me speak. I live directly across from the Exhaust Pros, which is right on Monona Drive. Ever since you've already got 100 units that just went up by the Walgreens, you've got, I don't know, is it 300 down in those other three buildings? And then the Century is also getting put in as residential. We need commercial. We have nothing left. All the businesses are gone except for the Walgreens. And I'd like to see retail instead of the housing to suffice the neighborhood. They were supposed to do pop-up places all over Madison, and it looks like they're concentrating it into this one area. And I've been here 25 years plus, because I lived down in Winnequa before this, and I have never seen the increase in crime. We've had, I can't even tell you how many different things happen. Things have been changing because of the increased density with the residential. What I'd like to see is commercial, and then I'd like to see upper units put in above that, the commercial businesses as retail businesses, whether they'd be like, you know, office spaces, maybe dentist offices up above, like kind of down by Sprecher Road and Cottage Grove Road. I'd like to see more of that than any more housing, because otherwise you're going to get a very problematic area, and it's not getting evened out here. You're supposed to spread it. And I know this TIF money, the incremental funding is coming into play, and people are getting grants. And I don't think that's the way we should be going with this. My whole neighborhood, I don't want to be changing that drastically. And we have people, I live on the lake, that have condos that are going to sell just because of what they're scared of what you're going to do.
Thank you, Ms. Lawler. Does that conclude your testimony? Okay. We do not have any further registrants wishing to speak. Joseph Krupp, 1952 Atwood Avenue, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Ethan Schwewe, Davidson Street, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Suzanne Harp, Dean Avenue, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Fred Sevenson, 3706 Dawes Street, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Ethan I think that might be a repeat. Shall we? 108 Davidson, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Kevin Yeska, 3131 View Road, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions, representing JSD Professional Services, 161 Horizon Drive, Madison. Let's see if we have any others that would be available to answer questions. Okay. Are there questions of any of the registrants, either the speakers or the registrants who said they were available to answer questions? Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, for the developer, Mr. Krupp. The question I have for him is, there's several of the speakers and several of the emails and that I received talked about commercial, and many of them desired more commercial at this area. In this area, I guess, did you consider incorporating more commercial space? And if you did, what was the outcome?
Good evening. Yes. I had very early conversations with Alder Foster, who expressed some of these same sentiments. And so I looked into it in more detail and kind of did a survey of available mixed use inventory in the city of Madison in general. And the vacancy rates in mixed use is currently running at about 20%. And it's trending even higher. And this was the case prior to the pandemic, and I only can imagine what it's going to do after. And that I see retail as being declining demand given all the online services and the way people have developed new purchasing habits. I tried to come up with a way to address the concern in terms of keeping the street front more active by bringing our exercise area down to street level. I came up with the concept of doing some work-live on that level as well, and that I really envision more as a kind of an experiment for me, and that I feel that given the tendency of people now working at home, there may be some people that will continue to do that are service providers, and that I'm willing to give it a try to give some more semblance of street connectivity with business by doing the work-live. So I own quite a bit of commercial real estate. I've seen a fair amount of new vacancy as a result of COVID, and it was declining prior to that. So I just am not comfortable in doing more than what I'm proposing. But I certainly did look at it, and I tried to come up with a method or a way of at least giving the semblance of activity at the street with creating some walk-up type live-work units.
Another question I have is that how large are the work-live units, and how large would the work area be in those units, and what sort of uses would be use those types of areas?
Currently, we're showing 4 segmented spaces ranging, I think the largest is 1,300 square feet, and the rest of them are about 1,000 square foot. So I envision those being more of an additional room or 300 to 400 square feet that could be dedicated to a commercial home use, say possibly an attorney, a tax accountant, somebody that has a service business that is going to continue to work at home from his residence, but having a place to separate his live from his business. I really don't envision there being a classic retail use in this space. First of all of our parking is at the rear of the building. The established retail in the neighborhood that I feel should get the focus and get the benefit of all this new density would really be the Royster site, where there is quite a bit of commercial already developed, and it's a natural. It's a natural, yet if you look at what's going on there, given it's been in a rough period of time, there's very little space being absorbed. And also across the street, there's a new project that has some commercial in it that, as far as I know, it hasn't been absorbed. So I think we have an oversupply of retail in this quarter, and that the existing retail that's there in the smaller settings is serving the more affordable needs. Yet I just don't see a typical retail use evolving at this corner.
Thank you.
That concludes your questions, yes. Commissioner? Okay. Commissioner Sundquist.
Yes, this is also for Mr. Krupp. You pretty well answered the question, but just on the commercial space again, I think the concerns raised were less about, how it fits into your building than whether there would be walkable destinations for this neighborhood. And there was a hardware store there for a long time, as somebody mentioned. I don't remember the Ben Franklin, but that was there. You just said that you don't see traditional retail like that on this site. But what if hypothetically, we weren't building the housing there and it was just refreshing a strip mall? You have the same, maybe that's not what you do, but you feel the same way that refreshing that strip mall, or no matter what we do, that those sorts of businesses are not going to locate there?
Yeah, I think that's generally my sentiment. There was an Ace Hardware there for a period of time, which was kind of the staple in the neighborhood that couldn't survive anymore in the era of the Home Depots and all of the other providers online purchasing. The most current use was a temporary use for the Penny Library, where they were waiting for their new space to evolve. I just don't see the future of walkable retail, not only in this neighborhood, but in many neighborhoods, just not having a great forecast, to tell you the truth. I think we're at an era where things have changed, and we need to recognize the new reality. And in my mind, I think creating more residential density in that neighborhood is a great way to support the retail that's already there, the new retail that's already there that is struggling.
Okay. And some of the testimony was concerned with affordability, both of the commercial space, it might drive out some of the mom and pop businesses that are still surviving there with relatively low rents, and you might be charging more, and of the residential. Can you speak to kind of the rental situation on both for both sectors?
Well, the residential portion of this, it is a market rate condition project, and I guess there's affordability and there's market rents. I think it's important that we have a mix of all of those, and I think the more currently the market is still has very, very low vacancies, and the way we keep rents more stable from escalating even more is to have an adequate supply. And as far as the retail component of it, it's one of the reasons I'm not building more retail is that the rents that you need to charge for newly constructed retail are very difficult for small businesses to afford, and it's just not a real viable alternative unless it's a high volume business, say for instance a a restaurant. That would be one of the things I would try to get located in that corner. But, I can only respond to the market as I see it. And I can only provide a product at a price that reflects, what it costs to buy and develop land at this point.
Right. And so maybe restaurants, the obvious thing for that space. What else what else do you think is possible there?
Well, it would have to be, a high volume type business. I definitely, I want to bring in something that provides an amenity to the building as well. And I think a restaurant would be a good option. I have the good fortune of being involved in a restaurant business as well, the food fight industries. And I certainly have been talking to them as this being a possible site for them. Their offices are in Monona. They've looked at Monona in the past as a location they'd like to explore, and they like this site.
Okay, and as far as market for residential in that area, what is this? Somebody, compared it to the new developments on East Wash. Is this going to be comparable to that, or lower, higher?
I would say it would be more in the range of, say, the Atwood neighborhood type rents, or near West Side rents, less than certainly the higher mid-rise buildings on East Washington Avenue.
Okay. And just following up on a couple items that we got by email, do you have any sustainable features that you'd like to talk about in the building, such as solar ready, geothermal, extra energy efficiency, green roof, et cetera? Anything like that?
Yes, we always prepare our buildings for future solar by providing the access to the roof. A number of our most recent projects, we've added solar after construction. All of our buildings qualify for focus on energy credits, and we to the highest standard of insulation, appliances. We do have stormwater collection. We have patio terraces that will provide some elements of a green roof. But yeah, it's part of our normal package is to be very energy conscious and in our design and in our actual construction.
And there was some comment about the runoff and being close to the lake. But I think it's pretty much impervious now. Can you comment on sort of the before and after on as far as runoff goes?
Actually, we have Kevin Yeska from JSD online somewhere. I think he would be more specific on that.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And my recollection is that you had registered. Is that correct?
Yes, I have. Yep, Kevin Yeska with JSD.
Very good. Go ahead.
Yeah, so to answer that question, we are meeting the newly adopted Chapter 37 ordinance, so providing the reductions required within the ordinance. So there's 3 different areas to stormwater in this site, and as Joe mentioned, there's a green roof component where we have a pretty substantial amount of plantings up on that rooftop patio. To the southwest of the property, we also have an underground TSS chamber, which is collecting a lot of that parking lot runoff. And then we're getting creative on the east side of our property with actually permeable pavers. It's a challenge in Wisconsin, but Joe, the owner here, has elected to take that challenge and maintain those permeable pavers, which would have essentially a drain system underneath it, but also helping to infiltrate some of that stormwater to meet the Chapter 37 ordinance. So, like I said, we're getting creative with 3 different methods. Definitely a challenging site, but the new ordinance is pushing us on that, which is good.
So it sounds like both the volume and water quality coming off the site will improve with this compared to the current situation, or maybe you didn't measure the current situation, but it looks it's a strip mall with impervious surface.
Yeah, we would be seeing a reduction on this site, absolutely. Those exact percentages, I would have to, pull up our stormwater management plan. I don't have that off the top of my head right now. But yeah, there is definitely a reduction, which is a requirement by ordinance.
Okay. That's my questions for now. I would just say thank you to all the people who commented. It was like some of the most constructive and interesting comments that I've seen on a proposal. I don't know what accounts for that, but there was both for and against. So it really helped me to frame up my questions to the development team, and maybe others will have their own questions, but thank you to everybody who contributed on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Sundquist. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I think this would also be for Mr. Krupp. I just had a question on those lit work units. Mr. Burrow had the slides with the signage for those units kind of just above the door. And I think that signage is, very important for the success of live work units, especially visibility, and it's given the grade change that's. So I was just curious, owner and property manager will control and pay for, to ensure, I know that signage is a separate application, but to kind of ensure consistency and that it's done correctly, if that's something that you anticipate you will handle, or if that will be the responsibility of the resident utilizing that space.
Yeah, well, we will definitely have control over the signage. And as you mentioned, the whole signage is a whole separate process, and we will come up with an acceptable uniform design that we would have everyone that's going to use it as a workspace with signage would have to comply with.
Okay, thank you. And then just one follow-up question on some of those emails that we received. There was a question about fence on the rear of the site, and looking at the landscaping plan, it looked to me like there is a solid, maybe 6-foot cedar fence at the back of the site. Can you just confirm that?
Yes, we do have a solid fence along the back, as well as we have extensive plantings along the upper edge of the terrace, which is intended to really keep people from our terrace from looking into those backyards. It'll take a little time for that to develop, but that's the intent of the design.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Krupp concerning the commercial climate, I guess. In the staff report, there's some discussion of the Cottage Grove Road Activity Centers plan from 2017. And there's mention of the challenge of the commercial market in the corridor, but it also, the market analysis showed that there was an opportunity for smaller retail commercial entities in the existing space, taking advantage of the lower rents and creating walkable, I think, activity centers. That's what that plan was focusing on. And I'm wondering what you think about that. Do you discount that as being outdated from 2017? And what your opinion is on that? I have a second question after that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the facts on the ground kind of answer your question. Is we have a 28,000 square foot neighborhood retail center that's virtually vacant at this point.
So I just don't think that the market is there. If the market was there, the current owner, who's been trying for some time to fill those spaces, would have had some more success, because the rents he was charging there were quite reasonable. Yet he was still unable to attract, tenants for those spaces. So I guess, does that answer your question? I'm not sure what more I can add to it, other than it's a reflection, I think, of a larger marketplace where these neighborhood retail centers, and particularly in this location, I know there's been a lot of talk about walkability in this neighborhood, and it somewhat puzzles me. My main part of my career was the development in the Atwood neighborhood, which I truly feel is a walkable neighborhood because there's enough contiguous massing there. It's a two-lane street. Buildings are close to the street. Yet when you look at the Cottage Grove corridor and Monona Drive, these are busy streets with 25,000 cars, 4 lanes wide, a median strip. I have a hard time envisioning kind of the walkability of a neighborhood that I think people are wanting in that location. I think there's a nice opportunity down at the Penny Library to create some of that with the connectivity to the neighborhood that's developing around there and the bike trail. But there's only so much that can realistically be absorbed in this changing market.
Okay. And just a related question, approximately how long have you been working on this development proposal, and has it been a couple of years or?
No, I actually got engaged in this project this past April or May, when I was approached by the current owner of the strip mall, and at which point I just contacted the owner of the Exhaust Pro building, who it couldn't have been more timely. He was ready to retire. He just was so ready to sell his property at that point. So it just kind of came together quickly by circumstance, I would say.
Okay, thanks. Just one more question then. I imagine this might be for you. I'm kind of having trouble envisioning the live-work units. And if someone has a business in there that has any form of customer, how do you envision those customers accessing those spaces? Mm-hmm. Will they park in the rear and come all the way around from Cottage Grove? Or will they pass through the middle section of the building? Is that unlocked? How do people access those spaces?
Well, there's a couple opportunities. We have with phase 2, we have a parking lot to the east, as well as the one that's behind the building. So, and each of the units themselves, as it faces the street, has a separate entrance to what would be the workspace. And if we had somebody, I know there's concerns about the steps and the connectivity to the street, but if we had somebody with ADA requirements, we have a direct access from the rear parking lot through the lobby, fairly short distance in a corridor through a rear entrance to those spaces.
Is that corridor unlocked then?
Yeah, it would be on the first level.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for any of our registrants? Any questions for any of our registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Alder Foster, do you have questions for staff?
I do, thank you, Chair. I have some questions for traffic engineering, but I'm not sure if anybody
is here to represent them, or
I think that Mr. Parks is prepared to respond to questions in regard to traffic issues.
Okay. So I guess first I was just hoping for a little bit of a response to a number of the questions that were raised in the various emails, and we heard a little bit today. But I think primarily around the capacity of Cottage Grove Road in particular, and the concerns about the kind of ingress-egress issues from the proposed driveway, and as well as sort of the turning movements associated with that. So if you could just kind of speak generally to those concerns, that would be helpful.
Sure, I'll do what I can. Just a quick back of the napkin calculation was provided to me by Sean Malloy in the Traffic Engineering Division. Taking a look at estimated current trips from the shopping center, the restaurant, and the Exhaust Pros building, and then comparing that to the estimated number of trips that would be generated by the 2,500 square feet of commercial space and 188 proposed dwelling units. The ITE code, as you see here, is the Institute of Traffic or Transportation Engineers trip generation manual. And that looks, sometimes broadly, sometimes very specifically at land uses, and based on the size or amount of a particular land use, generally the number of daily trips that would be generated. And so what you see here is the existing shopping center of 28,000 square feet in and of itself would generate 3,000 trips. Now, that's not to say that it has generated 3,000 daily trips in the last year or every day over the last 5 years, but historically, since that center was built in the late 1960s, I believe. I know that the data is referenced in the staff report, but I'm looking at this and not at the staff report. Generally, since it was built, the average number of daily trips over the lifespan of that building would be 3,000 trips a day. You add in the recent restaurant use of the building, the former Jade Monkey, which is now moved just east of the proposed project site, and then the auto repair business, you come up with the 3,242 trips generated. And then you compare that to the number of trips that would be generated by the 188 dwelling units, and the, which is roughly, we'll say 5 trips a day per unit. And again, it averages out. We have 1 and 2 bedroom units. We have the live work units. We have some studio units. So it paints at broad brushstrokes and comes up with 1,023 daily trips, plus another 210 for what was estimated by traffic engineering staff to be a restaurant, kind of looking at perhaps one of the likelier high trip generating uses that would go into the proposed 2,500 square foot space. Obviously, there are other uses that could go into the space that might generate fewer trips. I don't know that there are many that would generate more. So, with that in mind, you come up with nearly a third of the trips that you have from the existing condition. And so you factor that with the location of the driveway that serves the underground parking, which is mid-project frontage along Cottage Grove Road, which will have a protected left turn because there is a twiddle or a center chicken lane in Cottage Grove Road where that driveway is, so that cars that are turning from westbound Cottage Grove into that driveway would be out of the travel lanes of westbound Cottage Grove. And then the otherwise relatively small parking areas on the eastern edge of the project and adjacent to the south wall of the western building, 24 and 14 parking stalls Traffic engineering staff did not feel that there were access concerns because of how the driveways are, where they're located, how they're configured, dispersing traffic, that they did not feel that they needed anything out of the ordinary to address access to the project. The one stipulation to that, though, or exception, would be that they are asking for a trash pickup plan. Both buildings have basement or trash rooms within the parking garages of each building, and where a trash collection vehicle, a private hauler in this case, would stop to bring those trash receptacles up to the street to be collected, presuming that's the means that they would do it. They did want more information on that so that they're not obstructing the bike lane or the travel lane on eastbound Cottage Grove Road if they should be curbside.
Thank you. So yeah, in summary, even though there's a lot of new units that would go in, they would expect there to actually be less traffic than the current conditions, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Did you have any further questions, Alder?
I did. I think two more.
Okay, fine, sure, go.
Thank you. So one was around the sidewalk width. So there were also questions related to that. So I believe the proposal calls for a 5-foot sidewalk, and previously when the Royster site was developed, that was developed with a more generous sidewalk, and I think was meant to have those sorts of conditions along the corridor. I think in particular, there's concerns with people that would be biking to and from the location. I think particularly going westbound to Monona Drive, I would expect most folks to be riding on the sidewalk to be able to connect there and not crossing Cottage Grove mid-block. Do you know if traffic engineering looked at requesting or requiring a wider sidewalk than the 5-foot that's proposed?
No, they have a specific condition of approval that wants an 8-foot terrace, a 5-foot sidewalk, and then the 1-foot buffer on the private side of the sidewalk for maintenance. So they're very specific in their recommended conditions of approval that there be a 5-foot sidewalk along the project frontage, as well as along the Monona Drive frontage. And on the former, with the recent reconstruction of Cottage Grove Road, I think there is a 5-foot sidewalk there now. That sidewalk might be relocated, but that relocation would primarily be to provide a deeper terrace, to provide a little more buffer between the arterial roadway and the sidewalk, and also to provide a place for street tree planting. Whereas right now, I don't believe there are any street trees along the project frontage.
Thank you. And then I think my last question is, there was a recommendation from Transit, and I think perhaps from TE as well, to consider a bus pullout lane there. This does seem like a corridor that has the potential to be a more significant one with the network redesign study. Have there been any initial work around that, and how that is that feasible to add in a pullout lane with the terrace and sidewalk that TE is requesting with the current setback as proposed with the plan?
Conversations about that. There's a little bit of uncertainty exactly how a bus pullout will work there. Just because, and if you look at the site plans, as well as the, like a street view of the site, there's a pretty acute corner. Monona Drive sort of tails away from the site heading northbound, and Cottage Grove Road comes in right at an east-west, kind of cardinal line. And so the reason why the pavement markings are the way they are right at the Cottage Grove Monona Atwood intersection, particularly on Cottage Grove Road, is to accommodate the wide span or wide berth of a turning truck. All of these roads are truck routes and county trunk highways. And in order to accommodate a truck turning from northbound Monona onto eastbound Cottage Grove without crossing the center yellow lines. That's why you have the sort of unique pavement markings there. And that accommodation for a turning truck will also affect how a parked Metro bus will interact there. We're trying to manage those turn movements, not block an existing bike lane on eastbound Cottage Grove Road, and provide some sort of accommodation for a bus pullout. So there's quite a bit of work that'll need to be done to get those details right. So I think it's fair to say that condition number 50 in the staff report from traffic engineering is hedging bets a little bit on accommodating that pullout given everything else, whereas the Metro comment regarding the bus pullout, which I believe is number 92 on page 20, is a little more absolute about accommodating a bus stop zone. So hopefully between those two conditions, we'll be able to negotiate some sort of accommodation for a Metro vehicle there. But the exact configuration, in terms of placement, depth, that definitely needs to be worked out given all of the other lit torches and juggling chainsaws that we have to accommodate at that intersection.
Thank you. So as that more fine detailed work is happening, if it's determined that all those things can't happen with the proposed location of the new building and the proposed setback, what would the process be for reconciling that? Would those conditions need to be not satisfied or removed, or would the project need to be altered to move in location to allow for that to occur?
I think moving the building is probably the worst case scenario, given all the moving parts that go into how the building is sited. There is a requirement that the project or the developer enter into a developer's agreement with the city for the public improvements necessary to serve the project. And that would typically go through Board of Public Works and the Common Council as plans and specifications for the project and approving the developer's agreement. So it would probably be there through the city engineering division, which will handle that aspect of the project implementation should it be approved, that they'll take that to Board of Public Works, and at Board of Public Works, that would probably be the forum where the improvements in the public right-of-way would be vetted, and ultimately the Common Council will approve a resolution approving plans and specs and the developer's agreement for the project.
Oh, okay, I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alder. Are there other questions of staff? Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I will recommend that the Plan Commission forward the zoning map amendment, rezoning 209 Cottage Grove Road from CCT to NMX, and the one lot certified survey map to the Common Council with recommendation of approval. And that we further find that the standards for the demolition permit of the conditional use permit be approved, and that which will allow the demolition of the 3 commercial buildings and the construction of 4-story mixed-use building with 2,500 square feet of commercial space and 78 apartments, and a 4-story apartment building with 110 units at 109 to 209 Cottage Grove Road and 3900 Monona Drive, subject to the conditions within the staff report.
Thank you. Do we have a second? seconded by Commissioner Solheim. Commissioner Cantrell, do you want to speak to your motion?
Sure. I think this is I agree with staff that this is a well-designed building and project, and it provides a density along this major east-west corridor within this area of the city. And I think that the plan proposed, or at least envisioned, that the Cottage Grove Road be a community growth area. And I think that this building provides the density that we should expect along this corridor. And I understand the reason why the neighborhood might want additional commercial within the building, but I also understand that why at least it may not be practical in this building. And I think that up the street, the Royster area provides a better opportunity for commercial with parking and larger areas that would provide that area for the neighborhood. So I think that, again, that's why I'm recommending it be approved, and I think it is a good project. Thanks.
Thank you. Alder Foster.
Great, thank you. And just wanted to say in advance, I do have a fair number of comments, and so I'll try to go through them quickly, but I just want everyone to understand this is a very impactful project and proposal for two neighborhoods. So I really just want to go through a number of things. So first, I just actually wanted to address the how the area and the current existing commercial space has been. I think Mr. Krupp may have given the impression that this is, that he said not incorrectly that it's currently, mostly vacant, but that is really just in the matter of the last 6 months. So this, in particular, the shopping center, which is really the heart of my concerns with this proposal, it is. I've lived in one of the adjoining neighborhoods for 15 years, and it's very rarely has there been a vacancy in that shopping center. In many ways, it's very similar to the Lake Edge Shopping Center, which is down Monona Drive at Buckeye. And both of those shopping centers historically have had a wide variety of businesses and a lot of activity. So a number of years ago, the ACE did not renew their lease, and they were the largest anchor tenant in that building. And very soon after they left, the Penny Library leased that space for the temporary location for Penny. All the other sites in that shopping center continued to be leased. There were changes over time. A business would move out and a new one would move in. And right up to the spring of this year, before COVID hit, we lost one business, and a new arcade had just moved a bunch of machines in to open up. And so this idea that there's just not demand in this area for that existing commercial space is not correct. And the vacancies that are there now are, I believe, largely because that is the intent is to redevelop this, and they are not actively seeking tenants to replace those, as well as some concerns with the current landlord that I won't go into. I did want to say that Mr. Krupp also talked about not having a lot of confidence in the future of walkability generally, and that it's perhaps we shouldn't be having a goal of walkable neighborhoods. But as was discussed earlier on a different project, that is precisely what our plans do call for. And it is very much in our adopted comprehensive plan as well as the special area plan. And, I appreciate his comments. I certainly don't agree with the viability of walkable neighborhoods in the future. But more importantly, it's what our adopted plans call for. So to sort of disregard that and say it's not viable, I don't think it's going to be the case. I think that would be a real error in practice if we went along with that. And if we do think that he has some reason there and we need to update those plans, if he thinks that, or if we think that this corridor specifically doesn't hold the ability to be a commercial activity center in the future, then we should go about rezoning it as a residential area. But it is very clearly and very specifically designated in the comprehensive plan, yes, as a growth area, but specifically as a transitional neighborhood activity center. And the descriptions about what that is and why that's designated that way as a future land use is very clear, and it's all about supporting an economically vibrant support to adjacent residential neighborhoods. That's what it's designated as, and that's what our plans call for. Specifically, mixed use categories. In our comp plan under the land use section, it says, it addresses this question of mixed use, and it says specifically, not every building has to be a combination of residential and commercial. But it says, while that's the case, special attention should be paid to maintaining commercial street frontages along mixed-use streets without creating residential gaps along streets that otherwise have commercial tenants at ground level. My concern here is very much the overall loss of commercial space. So it is incredibly significant. I mean, we are talking about 32,000 square feet of commercial space that I will say up until the last 5 months has been fully leased up. This has been an activity center for half a century for the Eastmoreland and Lake Edge neighborhoods and the greater East Side. And this in particular, in the Cottage Grove Activity Center's plan, 2 nodes were identified. This one at the intersection with Atwood, as well as the one down by Acewood. And of those 2, the Activity Center plan specifically says, we're not confident that the Activity Center down at Acewood has the long-term viability to support being to have a lot of commercial activity. But this one down at Atwood and Monona does. And it calls for supporting the current commercial activity and increasing commercial activity, not taking out the heart of that center and replacing it with, yes, much needed housing. Right now in this same corridor, there is approximately 10 acres of open land at the Royster site yet that could be developed with hundreds of units of housing without destroying this commercial center. Across the street on Dempsey, 1,500 feet away from this proposal, is another 5 acres of abandoned old industrial use shed buildings that are screaming to be taken down and have a 5-story residential building placed there. I understand that this developer has these lands and has a plan that it pencils out and that can make a profit and provide almost 200 units of housing. But nowhere in our plans does it say that we want to take this activity center and trade it for housing. It's really someone who attended those meetings and has read that plan, both our comprehensive plan, but especially this activity center plan. I probably read it 5 times in the last several weeks to really make sure I understand it, to make sure I wasn't missing something. And the idea that this proposal, I mean, you can say it's compatible with it because the plan does say we want additional density in here. And I'm fully supportive of that. And I think you heard a lot of the residents support that as well. And there are a lot of locations where we can do that, but we cannot trade the future commercial corridor for just a multifamily building. It's completely inappropriate, and it really requires accepting what the developer proposed tonight, which is retail is dead and walkable neighborhoods are a fantasy. And that is not what our comprehensive plan nor this specific activity center plan call for. So there's a lot of more details I'd love to share, but in the interest of time, I just want to kind of wrap up and say, I know that this decision is for a conditional use and demolition that are not for a use that is not currently permitted here. And specifically in the NMX zone, there's a requirement that 75% of the frontage of the major street be non-residential use. I would be very supportive of the proposed west building or a modified version of that would demolish the 2 standalone small buildings, replace them with a 4 or 5 story multi-use building with limited commercial on the first floor. I think that's a great use of the space. I think it's consistent with the plans. But this phase 2 proposal that demolishes 28,000 square foot of commercial and replaces it with 0 commercial, a multifamily housing unit on Cottage Grove Road with 0 commercial on that frontage, in spite of our requirements that it be at least 75% non-residential, is not compatible with our plans. That's not what our planning efforts call for. And finding the standards met to approve this is really, it's a real exercise. So specifically, I know that in order to deny that, you need to be very clear about why you're doing it. So I just wanted to offer up why I believe the standards are not met. So regarding the conditional use approval, I do not believe that standard 3 is met. And that is the standard that says the uses, values, and enjoyment of other property in the neighborhood for purposes already established will not be substantially impaired or diminished in any foreseeable manner. I don't think there's any question that the viability of the 2 neighborhoods that are adjacent to this corridor will see a significant diminishment in their current access and the current neighborhoods. In addition, in regards to the standards of approval for demolition, under 7A2, it says the Plan Commission finds that both the requested demolition or removal and the proposed use are compatible with the purpose of this section and the intent and purpose expressed in the zoning code for the zoning district in which the property is located. The statement of purpose for the NMX district, which is what the proposed district would be, the statement of purpose reads very, very clearly, the NMX districts is established to encourage and sustain the viability of commercial nodes that serve the shopping needs of residents in adjacent neighborhoods, period. To find the standards of demolition met, that demolishing a 28,000 foot commercial center to replace it with a multifamily residential unit, that is going to encourage and sustain the viability of commercial nodes and serve the shopping needs of residents in adjacent neighborhoods, I don't understand any way that you could find that standard met. So I appreciate you listening to all my comments. Happy to answer any clarifying questions. And I would ask you to not find the standards met here and not approve this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there further comments, additional discussion? The motion on the floor is to approve. Commissioner Cantrell. You're muted, Commissioner.
Sorry. All I would say is that we need density so that commercial development can thrive. And this project and the other one across the street provides density, and the Royster project provides density that allows commercial development to be viable. And that the Royster project provides the best opportunities in this area to provide those uses. And, you know, I disagree with the Alder. So, you know, I don't want to be in a, dispute here, but, you know, I think that this is a really good site for the uses that we have proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sundquist.
Yeah, well, two people who I rely on for thoughtful reasoning are here at, have both just spoken. And I've been wrestling with this for a while since I knew it was coming. Clearly, if we don't have walkable destinations, we don't have walkability. So the question is, how do we get to the walkable destinations? And when I read, I wasn't around for the passage and proposal of the activity center plan, but I did read it in the run up to this meeting. I defer to Alder Foster on he's read it more than I have. But I got the sense that this was pretty much what it was talking about. It did talk about the difficulty in getting new retail in the corridor. It actually showed a picture of Sequoia Commons, which is, the same developer's development near my house. And it does have more commercial in it, but it isn't hardware stores and grocery stores. It's just, more places more restaurant-y type places. And so in square footage, it's more, but in terms of your walk score type thing, it's probably not that different. So I got the strong impression looking at that plan that this was, when it talks about mixed use, this is the kind of thing we're seeing around the city. And we're wrestling, the 75% rule, unfortunately, is never met anymore. That in our work session on land use, I think we're pretty much agreed we need to redo that ordinance because we're getting these conditional use requests to waive that requirement, and I don't think any of them have been turned down. I mean, yes, it's in the ordinance that's a threshold, but because so many of them are sitting open and unrented as a reality, that is no longer a practical standard and has been, maybe somebody can remember one where somebody said, I want to do less than 75%, and we said, no, you can't. So I'm going to listen to what others might have to say. I hope others have more because, it is without the destinations, we don't have walkability, but without the density, we don't have the destinations, I don't think. So we're in a kind of a chicken and egg dilemma type thing. Thank you.
Alder Heck.
Thank you. I just one quick comment. I appreciate the discussion about walkability and density, and I think those are important considerations. I agree with Commissioner Sundquist about the 75% consideration, but I also am persuaded by, in particular, Alder Foster's discussion of the demolition issue. And I'm trying to unscramble all of that, but I think he made a pretty good case that the demolition standards are problematic, even though, yes, that shopping center is empty at this point. And, that's why I asked the question about how long had Mr. Krupp been involved in this and was trying to understand the history of that shopping center. I mostly just wanted to say that's what I'm struggling with, is how to weigh the demolition against some of the good points that you all had to offer to. That's all for now.
Alder Foster.
Thank you. To respond to a couple of the points that have been made, I very, very much agree with the value, first with the need across the city to build more housing, and I'm 100% on board. In addition, I think that this corridor specifically is a place that can continue to accommodate
some of that growth. And we have been doing it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to continue to do that. I think we're in agreement. I also agree that adding more housing density is one of the other main ways that we can support the economic vitality of this corridor. We need more people to live there to be able to support the businesses that are there. So I'm in agreement on all of these fronts. My point is that there are many opportunities for that development to happen right now in this corridor that don't take anything away. There are empty fields within 1,000 feet of this location where we can build 200, 300, 400, 500 units of housing. At some point in the future, this site should also get developed. I'm not saying that this shopping center should be there for all time. But we've heard today from Mr. Krupp that he doesn't think it's economically viable to recreate new commercial space as part of this project. We don't know what the conditions will be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but certainly if there were 500 more housing units in this corridor, perhaps the economics would be tilted enough where a redevelopment project for this location could include redevelopment of the Cottage Grove frontage commercial space. In terms of the Cottage Grove Activity Center plan that Eric mentioned, it really is, I think, very specific about how this new growth would happen. And I'll just read a couple phrases that really, I think, help articulate that. So under the economic development goals of the plan, it says these findings led to two main goals for the plan: support and strengthen the existing commercial corridor while also creating opportunities for new, unique businesses in mixed-use redevelopment projects on vacant and corner sites where appropriate. By making these activity centers a focal point for adjacent neighborhood, as well as part of a larger network of strong activity centers across the city, they will more likely weather changing economic environments. It's specifically, part of my objection here, again, specifically, is not just the overall loss of space, which is very significant, but it's the location. And unfortunately, I don't have a map to share with you. And I don't know how many of you are really familiar with this area, but this proposal is literally the center of this activity center. So if this were to move forward, you would basically maintain commercial space along Monona Drive that would connect to, I think, 3 additional businesses going south on Monona Drive. And then you would have a dead zone of straight residential fronting from the corner all the way east until you get to the new Jade Monkey and the VFW. You're basically pulling that whole section out and orphaning 2 then smaller sections of commercial space and doing exactly the opposite of what that plan is calling for, which is trying to build that center, that collective mass of commercial area to be an attraction point. Every place where it talks of in the land use section of that adopted plan, it says that goal number 1 was improve stability, cohesiveness, and relationship between commercial centers and residential areas. This is not doing that. This is removing the commercial center and placing a residential center in its place. And the land use and urban design goal number 2 from that adopted plan says ensure new infill mixed use housing or commercial development incorporate traditional neighborhood design elements. Encourage mixed use and multifamily residential development of 2 to 5 stories in Atwood where appropriate to anchor activity centers, not to displace activity centers. And then it says P is revitalize commercial frontages over time and where appropriate, incorporate existing and new businesses into multi-story structures with pedestrian, bike, and vehicular connections to adjoining residential areas. It's talking about, yes, supporting this infill development, but in a thoughtful, deliberative way over time that does not destroy the commercial, but incorporates it into the new redevelopment. This proposal is not a multi-use proposal. This has 2,500 square feet of commercial in one of the buildings and nothing in the much larger building.
this is not what the plan called for. Thank you.
Commissioner Hagenow.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I just want to say I also found myself coming into tonight's meeting kind of on the fence here. And my biggest problem with this was the demolition of the commercial space and replacing it with such a small amount. And Alder Foster, I've got to thank you and even Alder Heck for bringing up the question surrounding how long this has kind of been in the works, because I think I can't remember how many years that the hardware store has been out of there. But I was in that hardware store. My sister used to live in this area, so I'm fairly familiar with it. And it really just strikes me as a almost chicken and egg kind of thing, or cart before the horse kind of a thing here, where, we're getting rid of that commercial space so quickly. And yes, the city needs a lot of additional housing. I can attest to that as well, being that that's the business I work in. But I just can't get my head around that demolition of all that commercial space, leaving and having it replaced with all the residential. So those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I have the same concerns with the lack of commercial space, similar to the concerns that we've talked about when there are these residential developments, like on the far west side of town, out past Old Sauk, because those areas seem truly isolated without commercial and retail there to provide services to those residences. It's not as concerning to me here because this is an urban area and there are commercial spaces nearby. I don't have, a sense of really how close they are, but there's opportunities for more commercial to develop as it comes along. So I feel like in the past we've talked about creating these places so that they can be converted like residential to commercial. And it's more of a rhetorical question, but if that's something that we can discuss more, or something that Mr. Krupp, the current developer, has considered, I'm not sure how much bigger the live workspaces would have to be in order to potentially convert them into a more, standard commercial use. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there other questions or comments? Further discussion? Seeing none, we will come to a vote. The motion is to approve the development proposal, including the conditional uses, the demolition proposal. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see raised hands to object. Okay, there are some raised hands. I am going to ask our secretary to do a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Cantrell? You're muted, sorry.
Yes, I recommend approval.
Commissioner Solheim?
Aye.
Commissioner Hagenow?
No.
Alder Limmer?
No.
Commissioner Sundquist?
No.
Alder Heck?
No.
Commissioner Spencer.
Aye.
Let's see, have I missed anyone? Why am I only showing 6? Hang on just a second. Tim, did you get that?
Alder Heck.
Yeah, Alder Heck was a no.
I'm showing Cantrell, Solheim, Spencer, aye, Hagenow, Heck, Lemmer, Sundquist, nay.
Okay, so that is 3 votes for, 7 votes against.
4 votes against.
3-4.
4 votes against, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The motion to recommend approval fails.
Fails. So I would be looking for a motion potentially to place on file without prejudice, a motion to deal with this proposal. Commissioner Sundquist.
I would so moved with the added recommendation that well, we probably need a justification for voting it down first,
right.
Don't we?
Well, we need something for the place on file motion.
Yeah.
We need conditions that aren't met.
So I would say that it fails on the demolition standards and on and incompatibility with adopted plans. There's 2 reasons. And so the motion,
I'm sorry,
very inarticulate. I would say the motion is to place it on file without prejudice for those reasons. And specifically, if the developer is able to do better on the commercial side, it might make it over those objections.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Hagenow. Did you wish to speak further to your motion, Commissioner Sundquist?
No, I mumbled plenty just then.
Okay. Are there other comments on this motion? Commissioner Hagenow.
Yeah. I guess I would just kind of second what Commissioner Sundquist said there. I think, if the developer can come back with some additional commercial use in there, I think it might be a little easier to stomach, and it may flow into the kind of the specific, the orderly kind of development of the neighborhood. So
thank you, Commissioner. Alder Heck.
Thank you. I guess I'll add that if the developer comes back with, another 2,500 square feet of commercial space in the eastern building, I'm still going to struggle with this, but we'll see how creative they can be. I'm still concerned about the shopping center, the loss of the existing shopping center, and how that relates to the activity plan that we heard so much about. But I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Alder. Anything else before we come to a vote? The motion is to place on file without prejudice. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Could we again please have a roll call, Ms. Stouter?
Commissioner Cantrell. You're still muted. I'm sorry.
No.
Commissioner Solheim.
No.
Commissioner Hagenow.
Aye.
Alder Lemmer.
Aye.
Commissioner Sundquist.
Aye.
Alder Heck.
Aye.
And Commissioner Spencer.
No.
Okay, 4 ayes, 3 noes. That motion fails unless the chair would like to break the tie.
No, I think, don't we have 7 people here? So
we have 8. We have 8, including you. So we'll need 5 for a motion to pass.
Okay, I thought without Alder Rummel here. I will vote aye. Okay, motion passes. We have one more item on our agenda. Agenda item 22, Legistar 61673, 3447 North Star Road, Town of Cottage Grove, consideration of a certified survey map within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction to create 2 commercial lots. Mr. Parks.
Members of the Plan Commission, Madam Chair, 3447 North Star Drive, Town of Cottage Grove is a request to divide a 9.65 acre parcel on the west side of North Star Road into 2 lots, one of 6 acres, a flag-shaped lot on the westerly portion of the property, and then the remaining 3.65 acres on the easterly portion of the property. Staff has reviewed the request and does not feel that it meets the standards or criteria for extraterritorial approval, which are noted on page 1 of the staff report. In particular, we don't feel that the proposed lots maintain an existing general land development pattern along North Star Road, rather seek to create a development pattern that by and large does not exist. And we feel that that's the proposed lots are inconsistent with the lot width, depth, area of other parcels in that area, particularly along North Star Road, because at its closest point, the subject site is a 1/4 mile away from County Trunk Highway N to the west. And so any parcel configuration that you have along County Highway N, we don't feel is an appropriate correlation to lots proposed on North Star Road, a 1/4 mile to the east. We feel that the land division will negatively impact the city's ability to extend services to this area and accomplish future annexations, which we feel are in direct contradiction to the extraterritorial criteria. And we recommend that the land division be placed on file without prejudice or rejected. I'd be happy to answer questions after the hearing. I will note that the applicant, Mr. Banovitz, has provided comments that are attached to the legislative item. Those were received earlier today, and they include his rebuttal, as well as some maps that he feels are relevant to the Plan Commission's consideration. So I do want to make note of that in advance of his speaking. He is registered, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. The only registrant we do have for this is Stephen Banovitz, 714 Weld Bridge Road, Cottage Grove, Wisconsin, in support and wishing to speak. Mr. Banovitz, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. It is correct that the parcels that we're talking about are inconsistent with the lands that are out there, but it's very consistent with the long-range plan for this area to become commercial. I hope that you have 3 maps in front of you that help explain this situation. The other lands in the immediate facility are agricultural, so they are undeveloped, so they will never be anything like the commercial district that's being proposed and has moved forward. There are already 2 commercial buildings up that are doing business every day out of them. We're just proposing that the lot that I have, which is 10 acres, is too large for my need, and I've got another business that would like to move in and start building buildings and start working there each day. I don't see that there's really any negative impacts to the city of Madison in terms of utilities, transportation, or any specific future city needs of the lands. I found that there are many other parcels in the immediate area, certainly not necessarily adjacent, but if you take a bigger swing around that are about this size. I think the other that you could look at is the unusual shape is the long green line that you see is 66 feet wide. That should be an obvious clue that both the township and the county are looking at a future ROW. And that is why this property is flag shaped. It will allow access to the back portion of this 10 acres, the west portion, as well as all the lands to the south when they become changed to commercial. So I'm asking that you understand the vision that the township has and the county has for this area, and that we can move forward and continue to satisfy the long-range zoning and commercial plans for the area.
Thank you, Mr. Banovitz. Do we have any questions for the registrant? Commissioner Cantrell.
Okay. Do you own the land to the west? Mr. Banovitz?
Mr. Banovitz, you there.
Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't realize I had to do that each time. Yes, I own all 10 acres. Well, it's 9.65, but we just call it 10. I own and I want to continue to own the 4 that's to the east, and I would like to sell the 6 that's to the west.
But do you own the land further to the west?
No.
That you say that the 66-foot potential right-of-way will serve in the future?
No, I don't own the land farther west than my 10 acres.
And you're not dedicating the 66-foot right-of-way now?
The township hasn't asked me to. We're planning for that to be a future option if it's needed. When they developed the North Star Road, I gave them all the land that they asked for to do that improvement. And I would do the same again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there other questions of the registrant? Seeing none, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell. You are muted.
Unmuted myself, sorry.
Okay.
I would recommend that this be placed on file without prejudice as recommended by staff.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Hagenow. Would you like to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell?
Yes, I guess I can understand the applicant's comment about the 66-foot wide stem, but if that indeed is a potential future street, there's no indication on the CSM that will be that way, or even any intent to dedicate it at this point. And I'm assuming he doesn't want to dedicate it because he would have to improve it. So I guess at this point in time, I see no reason to approve this CSM.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, the motion is to place on file without prejudice. I am going to assume unanimous consent unless I see raised hands to object. I see no raised hands. The motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is business by members. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to comment at all about your question regarding UDC?
Yes. I sent one of my friends who is on the UDC an email just yesterday and asked him how the Galaxy Drive project turned out since they reviewed it on September 2nd, I believe. And he said that that the project that was presented to UDC was pretty much exactly the same project that they presented the Plan Commission. And as you recall, the Plan Commission had some comments and recommended approval of the project, but referring it to the UDC to look at the northern facade to kind of break it up. And we had some other comments. And I just looked at the notes of the meeting today, and the discussion was one of the commission members asked if this was the same project that the Plan Commission saw, and the answer by Brian Munson was yes. And then the UDC then granted final approval. So I guess I'm a little perplexed by first of all, the UDC's action without really addressing our concern. And I guess, and also in the future, I might be less reluctant to refer something to the UDC without getting it back for at least looking at it, because I think that, these buildings are going to be around for about 100 years. So if we have concerns about a building, I guess, I think that at least they should address it and at least, look at our comments. They may not agree with us, but, at least, give us a little respect. So I guess that's my I guess, update to the Plan Commission on the Galaxy Drive project.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Getting that kind of closed loop, I think, is a good thing, and it may well influence either referrals or how something's referred in the future. So thank you for bringing that back to us. Anything else in terms of business by members? Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. I wanted to add on a comment to that. It seems like a trend when something has been referred to UDC and we have specific things that we want them to address with the development and they're not addressed. So this seems like something that continues to happen. So I think having a conversation about, how to handle this would be helpful. Maybe, like you said, it's, having, developments come back to Plan Commission after going to UDC, or if there's a way to, try to make it clearer what we're asking them to do with the development.
Thank you, Alder.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Sundquist.
So just to follow on that, I agree with Alder Lemmer that I can think of a few of these where, we haven't gotten what we've been looking for from UDC. And, I don't know the reason, but it does seem like this is happening more than it used to. And so I'm not in love with having more process and more back and forth with projects coming back to us that, in another round, reopening the public hearing and, reopening discussions that were closed. But maybe there's some way do we have Chair Zellers, do we have a member on UDC, a Plan Commission member? Or have we in the past?
No.
Walter Ramo was in the past, I think.
I think that was just happenstance. We don't have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if that's a potential reform that we could look at. But I would also maybe suggest, if the chair is willing, to have a call with the chair of the UDC and talk about this stuff, and or some kind of a joint meeting that we could have. But I do think it's like now it's getting to be a real pattern, and would rather just have people be on the same page than have to bounce things back and forth and do do-overs and things.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hagen now.
Yeah, I just want to say I am in agreement with that, and I don't know if is there a way that we can leave the public meeting open and still send it to UDC and then get it back, so that we don't have to go through the back and forth with all the comments again each and every time that would happen. Maybe that would make it a little quicker.
Good thought. Okay. Alder Heck.
Thanks. I guess I'm concerned about adding another trip back to Plan Commission and adding to the process, but I do feel like there are probably a couple of different reasons this has happened. Some of it's on us, for perhaps having unrealistic expectations for what UDC might be able to look at. But then it's also that we've been pretty specific, and it hasn't been addressed. So I don't know if we can. I actually can't remember. Do we usually? Is it a condition of approval that we write in related to what UDC has to do? Or do we just, if we could be stronger in what we say rather than just, in some circumstances, rather than just saying, check this out, let us know what you think, actually work it into a condition of approval that we're working on or something. And that might make it more, point to how serious it is. But I agree that we might be able to talk to UDC and figure out a path forward for a lot of these situations. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Solheim.
I agree with Alder Heck in terms of making conditions stronger and that language. I also, I don't want to add anything additional to staff's work plate, but I find it helpful to see at the bottom of the agenda the recent Common Council actions, just to kind of close out what was approved based on what we approved previously, and perhaps some things that we refer to UDC specifically, if they could be included. I know they're meeting I think just once a month now. Just something maybe to kind of, trigger our memories and take a look back on Legistar at what was finally approved might be helpful.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on then, some good ideas here, and I think we need to explore some further. To the Secretary's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, just a quick update on the building setbacks and street trees ordinance that came up at our February 20th meeting, among other ordinances. With this one, staff has been working with 3 and now 4 likely sponsors of the ordinance, and our hope is to have it introduced to the council in October. We have met very recently with representatives from Downtown Madison, Inc. and Smart Growth Greater Madison to share the essence of the ordinance and get some of their feedback. And there are some concerns about the ordinance, and I believe that they'll be reaching out to the likely sponsors to discuss those further. But we still are moving forward with the general thought being that For those zoning districts where we currently have a 0-foot building setback, and they're mostly in the downtown core and some of our mixed use and commercial districts, in those areas, what we are looking to do is to create a dynamic setback ordinance whereby the building can still be set back at 0 feet, so long as the distance between the curb and the property line is sufficient. And we're looking at a 15-foot distance as being that threshold. And that 15 feet includes the terrace and the sidewalk. In cases where that distance between the curb and the property line is less than 15 feet, the building would need to be set back by 5 feet rather than the 0 that's allowable now. And so that's the essence of what we're looking at. I can tell you that I think, at least in my memory, this is the first ordinance that we've been working on that plays with the right-of-way, that sort of relies in a dynamic way on what's happening in the right-of-way. As you know, zoning pertains to property outside of the right-of-way. So again, this is has some interplay with what's happening in the right-of-way, and that can make it more complicated. As you know, and even as we discussed this evening with at least one project, the right-of-way is not fixed. It does change over time. Turn lanes get added, bus pullouts, et cetera. And so some of the details that we're still grappling with have to do with those questions. For instance, are we measuring that distance from curb to property line as it looks now before the development is proposed, or are we looking at an end state? And we're starting to lead toward that end state as being really the most practical, most important as far as the outcome for tree spacing. So I want to admit that we're still dealing with some complications of an ordinance like this, but I'm hopeful that we'll have this ready for sponsorship and likely introduction in October.
Thank you, Ms. Stouter, for that very good update. Appreciate that.
No problem at all. Looking forward to our next few regular meetings. On October 5th, as Chair Zellers mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we will have the amendments to the Plan Commission Policies and Procedures Manual up for your consideration. Following that, a revision to a plat on the far east side out at 754 to 904 Felland Road. And 2 zoning text amendments I want to bring up. The first is an amendment to the traditional residential planned, or TRP district, to allow for some smaller lots than what are allowed in that district now, and especially working with alley-loaded single-family homes. And so we're looking at ways that we might allow for even smaller lots, particularly for alley-loaded single-family homes in that district. The second zoning text amendment on the agenda, it's listed here for October 5th. I want to say that just as of yesterday, I was notified by the sponsoring Alder that he would like to postpone this for the October 19th Plan Commission meeting. And this is the electric vehicle charging ordinance. I believe it will be going to another committee on October 5th, and will likely be in front of the Plan Commission on the 19th instead. The last one I'll mention for October 5th is the next one here. 10,009 Sweet Willow Pass, the construction of a residential building complex with 110 apartment units in 3 buildings. That's on the west side. For October 19th, I think I'll go through all 3 of these listed here. First is the 900 block of East Main Street. This is for a new mixed-use building with residential units on that 900 block between East Washington and East Main in Urban Design District 8. And so importantly, this is a proposal for the first of any residential that we've seen proposed on the south side of the East Washington Avenue corridor in that Capitol East Gateway district. And so this will involve also an amendment to the Capitol Gateway Corridor Plan, which we're working with Alder Rummel on later this week to define that process. Second, 6145 to 6301 Mineral Point Road. This is an amendment to a planned development to construct a new 77-unit apartment building. And then finally, on the square on the 1 block of North Pinckney Street, demolition and rezoning from the downtown core district to a planned development district for the construction of a $350,000 square foot, commercial building with over 800 stalls of underground parking underneath it. And so those are the main items on our October meetings. I do want to reiterate again that we'll have that rescheduled October 29th special meeting as well. And thank you for your flexibility with regard to getting that meeting rescheduled. That's all I have for the evening.
Okay, thank you. Unless there is further business, I would need a motion to adjourn. So moved by Commissioner Cantrell and seconded by Commissioner Hagenow. And unless I see a hand to object, unanimous consent on the adjournment. Thank you, everybody. See you in a few weeks.